We'll start off this evening with Steve Ferris from First Baptist Church. Thank you, sir, for coming in. Everyone, please rise.
Father, we just come before you thanking you that we do not have a high priest who can't sympathize with us, but has been tempted in all points, just as we have. And therefore let us come boldly to the throne of grace, that we might find grace and mercy in our time of need. Lord, you have blessed us immensely in this nation. And Lord, we need your mercy now. We need your healing touch, Lord, from one corner to the other of this country, and Lord, around the world. And Lord, we can't be everywhere at every place, but you can. But Lord, we are here tonight, and so we ask your guidance upon our council members, upon those present here, Lord, with decisions that have to be made, that you would give them wisdom and knowledge. Lord, we ask you that you would continue to protect this city and this county, Lord, with all the disease. And Lord, there's many people hurting for help, and Lord, lots of opportunities for people to come. But Lord, we just need you to guide and direct. And Lord, we want to thank you that you have blessed us so immensely. And we want to thank you in advance for your mercy and for your grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Mr. Marler, if you'd lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all very much. We'll go ahead and get started tonight with the approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes?
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
I'd like to pull 6, C as in Charlie, E as in Edward, please, for discussion.
6 Charlie and 6 Echo, you said?
Correct.
Okay, so noted. Any other changes to the agenda from anyone? All right, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Any discussion? Very well, seeing none. Mr. Destin?
Yes.
I can't even remember the order. We've got so many people out here. I guess Mr. Marler? Yes. Mr. Minshall?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
And Mr. Braden?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. All righty, so agenda is approved. Moving on to the approval of minutes. Approval of the minutes for July 20th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion, Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll start on screen this time. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Menschel?
Yes.
Mr. Marler? Yes. Mr. Destin?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay, minutes pass. Moving on to proclamations, recognitions, and special presentations. I don't see Mr. Basilak here, is that correct? Okay, we do have a proclamation for Mr. Basilak. I will go ahead and I guess, shall I read this, or is it customary, city manager, for you to read this? Okay, I will go ahead and read this proclamation. It's a shame he's not here. He'll just have to watch the video. Okay, so this certificate is awarded to David Basilak for his life-saving courage under pressure, rendering aid to 2 distressed kayakers, pulling them to safety under the Destin Bridge while on code compliance patrol. His actions bring credit upon himself, the Code Compliance Department, and the City of Destin. So congratulations and thank you so much, Mr. Basilak, and we're sorry you're not here in person to accept this certificate. We honor you and we thank you. And it looks like I slightly went out of order, but I'll go back and get it. We have a presentation tonight from Mr. Mike Wilson. Are you here, virtually or otherwise? Fantastic. Mr.
I'm
Wilson
here.
is going to be presenting on drones this evening. He is from the FAA safety team. So, Mr. Wilson, take it away for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to talk to you a little bit about drones and drone activity and how it is involved with the city of Destin. Thanks to Catherine and James for the technical help and the pre-production. And I'll look forward to making a presentation for you. And then afterwards, if there are any questions that we can facilitate, or if you have any questions that you need to have answered, we can do it however you like, either live over a webcam or in writing or whatever you need. You'll have my contact information. But it's a pleasure to be here. I've been in the drone space for about 10 years now with the FAA, and as a former fighter pilot for the Navy, Pensacola is a dear spot in my heart. And as an airline pilot for Delta Airlines, I flew to Pensacola and all around the Southeast for 30 years. So it's a sweet spot in my heart to talk to you tonight about a little bit of Destin. This is the information that I received that y'all were asking about, and so I put it down on the slide just to make sure that I'm answering your questions and giving you the information that you're asking for. So we'll get right into it and talk about unmanned aircraft systems operations, basically in talking about civil operations versus public operations. Civil operations be divided into two parts, whether or not you're for compensation or hire, in other words, the colloquialism of commercial, or whether or not you're conducting recreational operations. Same thing with public aircraft. You're essentially divided into two, but basically it's built around government function and what you're doing with the aircraft. It can be for public safety, for all your first responders. It can also be for DOD, or any federal agencies that you have, of which the Gulf area has many. Additionally, there's kind of a cat and dog scenario with institutions of higher learning. We do allow institutions of higher learning to modify their use in the sense of certification and use as a recreational operation. And lastly, we'll talk a little bit about authorizations and permissions, because that's the name of the game with the FAA. The FAA allows you to request authorizations or permissions or exemptions in addition to subscribing to the rule. So we'll talk about the first things first, and that is the purpose of flight. So the purpose of flight for a drone operator is always asking, what am I? Am I a civil or a recreational operator? And if I'm flying strictly for fun, recreational purposes, I can be considered recreational if I subscribe to the Public Law 115-254, which is the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018. And in that act, there's an exception for recreational pilots. And those recreational pilots must subscribe to all 8 conditions that are held within that exception. And if you cannot subscribe to those 8 conditions, then you default into Part 107, which is our civil small unmanned aircraft rule. Otherwise, if you're flying for any other purpose other than recreation, you default similarly to 107. We have a great website. This is not meant to be an iSlide here, but it is a commercial for faa.gov/UAS. It's an all-encompassing website that we have that we're very proud of, and it'll take you from soup to nuts regarding the beginning, how to get started, what to do, where to register, whether or not you're a recreational, a civil, or a public user, or in some cases educational users, but it's a good resource. The first question that we ask when we start talking about flying drones is who owns the airspace? Just as in manned aircraft, unmanned aircraft are required to fly in different classes of airspace And if they need to fly in controlled airspace, then that's when the authorizations come into play. But the bottom line that y'all need to know as the City Council is that the FAA regulates that airspace from the ground up. There's no private airspace above property, and the local government can't regulate that airspace. We can talk about operating off of the ground, takeoffs and landings, and all of that, but as far as the airspace goes, that's our turf. That's the preemption of federal law that gives us that authority. So I thought that I would show you. I don't know, I can see most of you online here in our virtual space, and I don't know how many of you are pilots, but if you're not a pilot, this chart can be very daunting. This is the visual flight rules chart for the Destin area. And you can see, if I can, I don't have my cue here. I'll try to use my my cursor, and my white cursor, although it's not very good. But you can see here, I'll show you Destin specifically in just a second. But all the way over from Pensacola to the west, all the way down to Panama City to the east, is a myriad of controlled airspaces. All of these circles generate airspace around a variety of installations that can be federal, military, the commercial airports at Destin, the commercial airports up at Eglin, and all over. So in addition to that, this VFR chart shows that there's a vertical corridor with the dark blue arrows here and a east-west lateral corridor along the beach. And that area subscribes to this Special Air Traffic Rule, Part 93. And that means that, number one, you got to have clearance. Number two, you have to have radio contact going through that. That's one of the reasons that it becomes very difficult to fly a drone in this entire airspace. To get closer, you can see my arrow. I've tried to point out Destin here in the beach area, Fort Walton Beach, over from the bridge to the west and back over to Grayton and Seagrove to the east. This is the area around Eglin Air Force Base up here as we go north. And this area here is a restricted area all along this way because of high-speed military aircraft. So again, just a familiarization between Valparaiso down to Destin, and the arced circles show that you are in Category D Delta airspace. When we talk about that, we need to talk about the civil operations that I mentioned. So let's dive into that for a minute. Part 107 is often referred to, as I mentioned before, the commercial rule, and it defines the applicability of small unmanned aircraft as being less than 55 pounds on takeoff. That includes the camera or any carriage of items, anything else going on, the whole package of less than 55 pounds. And if that applies, then you fall under Part 107. Similarly, there's a registration requirement, just as if we were manned aircraft, and every unmanned aircraft operated under Part 107 has to have their own individual registration. You can do it at our website. There's a $5 fee. It's good for 3 years. Easy to do. Similarly, though, to manned aircraft, we also require a Part 107 pilot to have a remote pilot certificate. So one of the things that you might not know is that when we issue a certificate after someone has gone through their training and is ready to be certificated, that certificate doesn't expire, but the currency does. So in this case, we have a 2-year currency for remote pilots once they get their certificate, and we divide it up into either being qualified by taking a recurrent knowledge exam, or if you're a Part 61, in other words, a manned aircraft pilot already, then you can take simply the recurrent online course, no test, you just take the course, correctable to 100%, and away you go, because we assume that because you have a manned certificate that you know about airspace and other qualifications. I was asked to talk about the operating rules, so I pulled out a 107 here, the operating rules, which are in black. Basically, they include being flown or supervised by that certificated pilot. And if you're supervising a pilot under the controls, then that remote pilot in command has to be able to take immediate control. You got to be over 16 or equal to or over 16 years old in order to qualify for a certificate. The drone has to be registered. It's got to be pre-flighted and insured in safe condition, and not operated in a careless or reckless manner, just like our manned aircraft. We do have a difference in that no medical certificate is required. Medical condition is the responsibility of the pilot in command, and of course, no alcohol or drugs associated with that. In controlled airspace, as I mentioned, that's where we get into the air traffic control authorizations that are required. Now, in addition to those items in black, the ones I have in red are in fact our rules. So it says that you can't operate more than one unmanned aircraft at a time. You got to maintain visual line of sight. You can't operate from a moving aircraft or vehicle. You got to fly during the daytime. You can't operate over human beings, and you're restricted to 400 feet, 87 knots, 3 miles visibility, and 500 feet below clouds. All those items in red, however, are waivable. So if I wanted to fly 2 aircraft, if I wanted to go beyond visual line of sight, if I wanted to operate from a boat, if I wanted to fly at night, I could certainly put in a waiver request, an operational waiver request, and we can do that online. Public operations gets into a little bit of where your counsel is, I believe, so this might generate some interest and some questions. Again, on our website, we have a public safety and law enforcement toolkit that is on that faa.gov/UAS website. Again, it's a good resource for you to look at all the things involved in public safety. So when we get into first responders, law enforcement, all of those kinds of folks that are doing that, they can operate as a public aircraft because they're serving a public function. But if they were to go out and fly recreationally, if they were to go out and fly and take pictures, for example, that didn't have anything to do with their first responder duties, then they would fly under Part 107. But they do have an option to fly under public certification. One of the really nice things that we've got that I didn't include for some reason, I just color me crazy, but I forgot to include the public safety small drone playbook in the slides that I sent to James. So what I'll do is send this copy of my slides to him, and you can get the real deal. It adds about 5 slides to it, but it gives you a little information on this public safety small drone playbook. The really great thing about this is it's a great informational resource to public safety officials. You know, when you're doing investigations, if you're law enforcement agencies or sheriff's office, fire, any of those kinds of folks, first responders, if they're into the middle of doing some type of drone investigation, you can help them by showing them this book, and it helps distinguish this difference between what you can do and what you can't do, what actions they can take. And additionally, we have a page 13 where you as a city council or them as public safety group can take notes, put in the local statutes, any legislation, rules, or otherwise that you might have for them. The book is divided into several sections. A really good one is the quick reference guide for prohibited operations. So you've got the overflight over stadium, ops over people prohibition, not being able to fly at night unless you have authorization, right-of-way, meaning giving way to manned aircraft and beyond visual line of sight for the BVLOS. It speaks to the guide, like I'm talking to you today, about the differences between recreational flyers, 107 flyers, and public flyers. It refers to all of our regulations and statutes and advisory circulars that we have. I only made a partial list here, but Part 107 is the commercial rule. Part 61 is the manned rule that speaks to other qualifications in addition to being a remote pilot. And Part 91 is the operational rule for aircraft that either are public aircraft or larger than 55 pounds. That public law of 2018 is mentioned there, 115-254, and the advisory circulars that help our flying public understand what the rule is meant to say. So we have the exception for recreational flyers, public aircraft ops, and small unmanned aircraft system ops. The local, this is what I was talking about at page 13, the local laws and statutes can go in here, and things for you to think about are, okay, what about trespassing? What about disorderly conduct? What about interfering with public safety operations? Any of the privacy issues, and then there's a good Q&A section that talks about questions that you can ask the operators if you have a law enforcement officer confront an operator that he thinks is either operating outside the bounds of his certificate or doing something that would affect flying safety. Gives him sample questions to ask those operators. It gives you a graphic sample of what a remote pilot certificate looks like, a registration certificate looks like, a certificate of waiver or authorization, what it looks like, because we have lots of law enforcement agencies and officers that have a hard time. They could be shown a driver's license and they wouldn't know that it's a remote pilot certificate. So this book helps them with that. It also includes web resources. One of those web resources from both the book and our website is a combination here, again, not meaning to be a nice eye chart, but the first one is Drones and Public Safety, a guide to starting operations when somebody wants to get started. The second one is Law Enforcement and Public Safety and how that fits in and where you are operating. And the third one is, what do I do if I'm a law enforcement officer and I have a drone response, D-R-O-N-E. So it lists it down of the steps that it would take to help the FAA. Remember that we are not criminal, we're civil penalty, and law enforcement becomes the criminal piece of that. Additionally, the other thing that I wanted to mention here too was, especially with hurricane season now upon us, out west it would be for the fires, and so we get involved with what was formerly known as an emergency COA, Emergency Certificate of Authorization, and it's officially titled an SGI, Special Government Interest Certificate of Authorization. And what that does is it gives virtually an immediate approval, in 30 minutes is immediate to the FAA. So, but it does give very rapid approval to operate in the event of a natural disaster or some other emergency situation, such as we're going through right now with COVID-19, that may require some type of expedited approval rather than anywhere from 24 hours to 90 days. You get it within about 30 minutes. But you've seen that I've included some operations that could be considered for an emergency COA, special governmental interest, and that is your firefighting or search and rescue, the LEAs that are involved, any kind of utility infrastructure issue, the incident awareness and analysis that we've now allowed law enforcement agencies to do forensics after an accident, and it can be conducted in about 30 minutes instead of taking 2, 3, 4 hours of tying up traffic. And it allows the automobiles or the things that were involved in the accident to be moved out of the way in a much more rapid fashion. So that's a good one. And then, of course, the damage assessments, as that leads to, a lot of people are doing the video of the accident, and then in the forensic recovery, they're doing a 3D printer simulation of the accident, and that allows them to better take measurements and conduct that damage assessment. We also talked about the media, and the media is a big part of this, and so if there's something crucial that they have to get out to the public for video or otherwise, then certainly that would fall under the special government interest. There's the website for it for approval. Okay, getting on to recreational operations, knowing that you have a beach right out in front of you, I know that would be a popular discussion item. So we talk about, okay, remember it's flying for fun. However, that means that you can't fly it for business or marketing or real estate or commercial purposes. So that puts Jimmy Jones out there saying, well, I'm just going to take some pictures, but I'm going to sell them on the internet, or I'm going to sell them to a local photography store, or open a business to do that. And that constitutes having to fly under Part 107, not being a recreational pilot. The exception that I spoke of earlier out of the Public Law 115-254, it comes out of Section 44809 for all of you folks that follow that kind of thing. And basically, those are the 8 things I spoke about earlier: maintaining the recreational purpose, registering and marking your aircraft, visual line of sight, and giving way to manned aircraft. The authorizations that are required, many people think that recreational pilots don't need that authorization. Well, yes, they do. So if you're in controlled airspace, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, or Echo, and Destin is in Delta, you need that airspace authorization. Got to stay below 400 feet, and you got to pass an aeronautical test that we established out of the public law, and you have to operate within the bounds of a community-based organization, and those 2 things are still in development. We're almost done with them, I can tell you that. The legislators determined that they wanted to have a test for, just like we do for any other operator of aircraft, and since unmanned aircraft are aircraft, we comply with that request. And then the CBOs are the ones like the Academy of Modeling and Aeronautics that have certain guidelines that we want recreational operators to fly. So with that, the CBO recognition is coming. They're going to apply to be a CBO. We're making that. We've determined all the necessary requirements, but we're automating it now, and that takes a little bit through the IT development. Additionally, on the test, we went out to stakeholders to consult with them, got the test written, and we've stated through the law that recreational flyers are required to pass that test. We hope to have that content available very soon and available electronically. Once those people that are recreational pilots do pass that test, if your first responders, LEAs, those kind of folks that are looking to see if somebody is operating legally, they must provide proof of that passage of test, either to me as an aviation safety inspector, or somebody like me, or any law enforcement agency. So in remembering, for recreational pilots, just like Part 107 pilots, you got to register your aircraft, except for what I would describe as a toy. So anything that weighs over 0.55 pounds, 250 grams, you got to register it. And the person registering has to be 13. If he's younger than 13, then a parent who is dependent, or they're dependent of, can do it as well. Again, just like 107, the drone's got to be labeled with the registration number. It's still $5 and still good for 3 years. The hiccup in some recreational flying, though, is this airspace requirement issue. And in uncontrolled airspace, what we call Class G, you can go up to 400 feet, don't have any authorization required, don't have to notify the airport, you're good to go. And in controlled airspace, however, you got to have an authorization. And as I showed you on the VFR chart, all of Destin is in controlled airspace, Class Delta airspace. So you've got to have an authorization as a recreational pilot. So we talked about where can you fly in that case, because everybody wants to fly their drone. Well, we've established some fixed flying sites, we're establishing FAA required identification area, FRIA area, and we've got Class G airspace. So the way that you're going to fly in Class Delta airspace around Destin is twofold. One is you got to get an approval, but two is we'll look at a facility map here. I'll show you in a second about the difficulty of doing that based on all the flight operations that are going on around Destin. The hiccup here is we ask people to not contact FAA air traffic control. We used to ask that, and it got so bombarded. Our air traffic control people got so bombarded that we worked out a way that they didn't have to do it, and that's the facility maps I'm going to show you in a second. Remember that we now have 1.6 million registered users, and we've got about 168,000 commercial users right now in the drone space. So we do have an awful lot of registered users, and everybody wants to fly them, and everybody wants to figure out how can we either control it, fly them, or not let them fly. One of the things that we do have with the fixed sites is the fixed data delivery system, and this blue circle on this Open Data ArcGIS map will tell you how to do that at that website and whether or not you can fly in a fixed site. Again, Destin does not have any fixed flying sites, so that option is out. But in controlled airspace, when we're talking about flying, you've got to adhere to your authorization, to your approval. You got to comply with the letter of agreement that's made with air traffic control. That brings me to the institutions of higher learning. So we talked about colleges, and there's always been this discussion of branching from that recreational use into higher education, and we defined that by the Higher Education Act in 1965. And basically it says for educational or research purposes. And as we look at that, we're talking about instruction of those students after school, academic or research related to the use of it that maybe professors are doing, activities that are taken as part of that research, and then any other academic activities that are approved by the school. The operation, as I mentioned, is still conducted under 44809, the recreational exception. And the good news is that a school can apply for community-based operations status, and we're issuing a new advisory circular. Right now we have a B, 9157B, and 9157C is going through vetting right now, which will provide the CBOs the opportunity to apply for that status, which includes universities and schools of higher learning. So that's all good. With these authorizations comes some automation, so that's good. The Lance system has proven to be very popular. This is within very short time frame, 30 minutes or so, to getting an approval to fly in controlled airspace at or under 400 feet. And it gives that awareness to air traffic control that they know that it's okay. They've looked at their airports. We have about 6,000 airports that we're looking at. We're approaching all of them to determine what the altitudes we can fly at. And of course, you want to stay away from the departure and arrival corridors and the area of operations around the airport, and you have the whole manned aircraft issue, all of that. So sharing that airspace really becomes an issue, and the Lance system helps us do that. And it provides both the civil and the, I should say the 107 and the recreational operator the ability to gain that permission. Another form of authorization that we have is stadium restriction, as far as any stadium that has the seats of 30,000 or more, and you've got all your regular games. The way the regulation was written initially included a Major League Baseball and National Football League and NCAA Division I. Well, there isn't even Division I anymore. They don't call it that anymore. And what about minor league baseball and those kinds of things? So it becomes a little bit of a moving target. And if you know anything about unmanned aircraft over the last several years, things change on a regular basis, and we are trying to obviously assimilate the unmanned aircraft into our national airspace. And so as a result, we learn by exception, we learn by data, and we learn by safety. And our goal is to make sure that the authorizations that we do provide ensure a safe national airspace. Lastly, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the facility maps. These are a little bit hard to get your arms around, but once you've seen it, you'll get it. And that is, if you can see this grid of area, in this case, it's around Colorado Springs, and these are all 1 mile squares. And remember, I told you that the operation request is up to 400 feet. Well, the airport and the airport traffic folks out in Colorado Springs went through their departure arrival corridors, determined where the best area would be to fly. So in and around the airport, it's going to be 0 because they don't want you flying there. But out here, it might be 100 feet, 200 feet, 400 feet, so that it opens up the opportunity for a drone flyer to fly. If, in fact, somebody wanted to still fly in that sector, there is always the opportunity in controlled airspace to request that authorization, which provides the opportunity to do that. So, for example, if I'm on Destin Beach and I have a drone and I want to inspect a hotel's roof, or if I want to take photographs of real estate, or if I have a commercial opportunity for the Chamber of Commerce, I can always request an authorization to make those flights. With the red grids, meaning that it's not available, this gives you a little tighter picture of what it looks like. And the grid map, facility map website is easiest to get to if you just Google visualize it and plus FAA, and you'll get to this site. It'll take, and then you can put in Destin or wherever that you want to go. The bad news is if you want to fly in a red zone, and if you want to fly at an altitude above these altitudes, then you need to allow up to 90 days for a review in that case. What I did for you was I pulled up the grid map for Destin, where the red arrow is here, because it's hard to see the small print. But so Destin sits right here north of the red arrow, and you can see that the north-south corridor between Valparaiso and Eglin goes right here, and then this lateral east-west corridor goes right here. So you would expect that all of this would be zeros, and it is. You would expect that all of these would be zeros, and they are. And there is some room for wiggle room, if you want, out over Fort Walton, of about 400 feet here. So it gives you an idea of where you can fly, but also, more importantly, where you need authorization. The last point, I just blew it up a little bit more. Here's Destin again, and you can see all along the beach, 0, 0, 0, all the way along the beach. And same thing on the backside, all the way down to Fort Walton and all the way down to Miramar. So that's what I wanted to show you. So thanks. I hope I didn't take too much time. I hope I provided some information for you. I'm happy to answer questions if you have any now, or if you need to contact me, there's my coordinates, and you can give me a shout, and I'll be happy to talk.
So anybody have any questions or comments? Any of the council members?
I just got one, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Sir, you quoted about wait for it not to be, I guess, a commercial drone or everything. Do you have actual guidelines to when it's a toy and when it's actually not a toy? You know, like I know we've had several incidents where they've had some birthday parties here, and the 10 to 11-year-old got a little drone and some people weren't too happy with it. So is there an actual guideline that decides whether it's a toy or not besides a weight category?
Yes, in the sense that if they're a Part 107 operator, weight doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's below 0.55 or up to 55 pounds or over 55 pounds. Weight doesn't matter. If they are a recreational pilot and they are subscribing to all the requirements out of the 44809 exception, then again, it only applies, not it only applies, it applies to them as well as far as careless and reckless, as far as any endangering safety of flight, but below 0.55 pounds is only for registration. So even if you were a toy, and we don't have a definition of a toy, if that's answering your question better, but if you're below 0.55 pounds and you injure someone, what we would describe as significant injury or death, or anything like that, then our normal rules apply for flying for recreational aircraft. So the only real requirement, to address your question specifically, is that if you're below 0.55 pounds, you don't have to register it.
All right, is there any other questions? Mr. Wilson?
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
Okay. Mr. Wilson, thank you so much for this. It was extremely informative. We actually reached out for quite some time, and due to a lot of circumstances, this is the first time you were able, so we can't thank you enough for all your information. Recently, all of council has received some emails from citizens here that are pilots. And apparently, as recent as last month, at the Destin Airport meeting, the tower meeting, whatever, the tower manager discussed a litany of problems they're having in this area with drones. So I'd like to, a couple of questions. For a citizen that wants to make a complaint about a drone, what procedure, how do they go about, first of all, how would they go about, what's the procedure to make a complaint? If you could address that first.
Sure. The easiest way to make a complaint is go to our website, and we have all kinds of phone numbers and issues. It's not that we just have one phone number, but the easiest way for North Florida to make a direct complaint that will get action is to call the local Flight Standards District Office, which is for North Florida, it's located in Birmingham, Alabama. And it is the office that would handle any complaint. Also, the other side of it, if you go to our website, there is a national safety hotline that person could complain to as well. That gets attention at headquarters. So that way you'd have both sides covered. You'd have headquarters coverage in Washington, and you'd have the district office in Birmingham. I used to be in charge of the regional office in Atlanta, but with the reorganization a year and a half ago, we've eliminated that regional office, and now I'm up at headquarters. Everybody's either at headquarters or in their respective district office. But for a complaint, we have a mile of information and questions and everything regarding any complaints that you could ask. The FSDOs are well equipped to answer them, and the hotlines are available if there are any issues like that.
Okay, moving on, and thank you for that. I know you're not necessarily prepared for this question, but in this area, do you have any feel for how many complaints we get here? Is this an unusually large area of complaints because of our airspace? Are you aware of that?
I'm pretty aware of it insofar as, when I was the head of the Southeast region, but the truthful answer is I can get that specific data for you, but not very many. Where we really spend a lot of time is in New York, Miami, LA, little bit of Chicago, but we don't have a huge volume of complaints in the Panhandle. But like I say, if you need that data, I can get it for you.
No, sir, that's not necessary. Full disclosure, I'm not a pilot, okay, at all. I'm getting this information based on phone calls and some emails that all of us from council received from citizens that are pilots, and they were speaking to the issues here. I don't know if we're going to have some public input on this. I don't know, Mr. Wilson, if you're going to be able to stand by. City manager, I don't know on this one if we have the opportunity, if we're going to allow public comment, because I don't know if one of those pilots may be listening and would have obviously a better question base than I would have at this point. And one last question, Mr. Wilson, from the standpoint of that, you mentioned not to contact the tower. I know that for an application, but when these pilots, I would assume, and again, I don't like assuming, when they're coming in, when they're taking off and they have an issue with the drone, and I'm sure I would assume they contact the tower, does the FAA individuals in the tower make a report, or is it up to the pilot to make an independent report?
Great question. So we, in accordance with the Aeronautical Information Manual, our pilots of manned aircraft are allowed to report any obstruction, any interference, any problem with drones, and they can report it to the tower. If the tower receives one of those reports, they file what's known as an MOR, Mandatory Operations Report. That MOR report goes immediately to our Washington Operations Center or the Regional Operations Center, in your case in Atlanta. And then from there, the information is tabulated and sent to the responsible district office. So it sounds a little bit odd, but it would go, so for example, if Destin Executive had a report or if Eglin had a report, then it would go from that airport back to the ROC and then back to the FISA, the district office, and they would handle it. But yeah, we get those all the time. I get, on average, just to give you that information, I probably get nationally about 30 a day. Not complaints, but operational reports involving where they are, where the drones are, or what happened, or if somebody was not flying in the proper space. And similarly, we get reports from manned aircraft operators that will say, well, I saw a drone over on my right side. Well, there's not a whole lot we can do with something like that, but we need that information of size, color, direction, altitude, and all of that. And then for the tower, if it's a safety issue, they have the ability to reach out to local law enforcement. For example, in Atlanta, we have 6 jurisdictions at the airport alone that can be called if there is an incident, and then those law enforcement agencies can go to the site if it's estimated, or inside the fence, outside the fence, of the airport, whatever it is, and then proceed with their investigation. Then once they've done that, then they contact our law enforcement agency partners in the FAA, and we put the information together to conduct an investigation.
One last question, sir. I'm sorry for monopolizing all your time, but you're a wealth of information.
Oh, no.
Thank you enough.
Well, I'm here.
In regards to enforcement and compliance, I don't know that our code compliance folks have a lot of experience with this. They might, but if one of our we call our code enforcement code compliance here in the city of Destin. If one of our code compliance officers would get a call and would respond to a neighborhood, what protocol would, in other words, what should he be looking for? You got a kid flying a drone. What would he look for to make sure it's a legal operation?
Well, that's what I was mentioning back on my slideshow.
I a little card, but they would be required to have that in their possession?
Yeah, that would, so basically that person could, as a representative of yours, should, number one, ask for registration, number two, ask for any licensing, any certificate, Number 3, ask for that authorization, especially in Destin when there is no ability to fly in Class G airspace, and then any other either conditions, authorization certificates. So, for example, if a drone flyer were flying at night in controlled airspace, he would need 2 authorizations, one for night, one for the airspace, in addition to his registration certificate, in addition to his pilot certificate.
Thank you so much for all of your information. We really appreciate you taking the time, sir.
Sure. And I will tell you, since you brought it up, full disclosure, when I was invited to do this originally, it was going to be in Destin. And I was all over that. I'd rather do that than from my home office, believe me. But thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. Any other comments from any council members? Seeing none, we appreciate your time and your presentation. Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Rodney has a question for you. Mr. Braden, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. It's like Steve was saying, it's a wealth of information. Thank you so much. Could I go to the website to see how many people actually in Destin or Oakland County are certified, or how many drones are certified to fly here in Destin?
It's another good question. You can certainly go to the website and determine how many drones are authorized to fly in your controlled airspace. Yes. We would have to go to the Law Enforcement Assistance Program, LEAP agents that are FAA employees that work with our local law enforcement agencies. And because of the privacy issues that are held within the registration application and licensing, we aren't allowed as a government entity to see those unless those LEAP agents give it to us. So I can tell you how many aircraft are registered. I can't identify all those people, but I certainly can identify the ones that are authorized to fly in your controlled airspace. Does that make any sense? Did I answer that question?
Yes, sir. It sounds like if we on the 4th of July, when we have 3 or 4 drones flying around up in the fireworks show, it sounds like there's a 99% chance that they're not certified, don't have the proper documentation to be doing so. And that was a question I had too, is, what can we do about it? Or what are the chances of catching somebody and actually, enforcement?
So 2 things. One is, as you pointed out, if you have a law enforcement agency officer confront, for lack of a better word, the operator and ask for those required papers, if they don't have them, then the law enforcement officer can detain that person to conduct an investigation. We've had some LEAs that take that person into custody based on public safety. Notice that that's not my national airspace safety, that's your public safety. If there's an issue like that, that becomes completely a law enforcement agency issue from a criminal standpoint. From a civil standpoint, if that person didn't have a registration, didn't have a certificate if needed, didn't have an authorization, then when that law enforcement officer talks to me or somebody like me, then we can institute a civil penalty. And right now it's $25,000 for everything, for each thing that you don't have. So we've gotten a lot of teeth into our enforcement, and it certainly has changed over the last 4 years since the Part 107 rule came out. But it allows our cities and governments in the local areas to better handle those kinds of scenarios. The other thing was, I've lost my train of thought here. I had another issue that dealt with that. Oh, I know what it was. in the world of preemption, I mentioned it lightly, but I wanted to emphasize it now since you asked the question, that you can control through your local government the ability to have a prohibition against flying from point A to point B. So let's say you had Destin Community Park and you didn't want people to fly in there. You can make a statute that says you may not fly drone ops in there. What you can't do is tell them that they can't overfly it. That's my airspace, not yours. But it is your ground, your property. So if you instituted a statute that said that you cannot take off or land, then it would also be incumbent upon you to put up some signs, put up, the idea of you require authorization to fly in this area, no drone zone. We have examples of that on our website. So it becomes a combined effort between what we can do from a civil penalty, what you can do from a statute and from a legal penalty.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question. So as it stands today, I can go to your website and get a drone registered and get certified through your website?
Yes. So you can apply for registration. You can apply for a certificate through Drone Zone. It's all on our website, faa.gov/UAS.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Braden. Mr. Wilson, if you'd stand by a second, we have a person here that would like to ask you some questions. Patty, would you like to come up and just speak in the microphone and have at it?
Hi, sir. Thank you so much for speaking with us. My husband and I are both private pilots based at Destin Airport. We fly a Cirrus SR-22 Turbo and a Piper Archer II. And on departure out of 3-2 or out of 1-4, they take you out to the coastline at 1,600 feet. Going out of 3-2, you'll cross over the harbor. Going out of 1-4, you cross over the beach, both areas where there's a lot of drone flights. We have both seen drones at 1,600 feet past us going the opposite direction. It's a real problem here in Destin, and I know from the tower that it is a no-fly zone. When Rodney asked the question about what does it take to get that, the registration, the pilot's license, whatever you need for the drones, it still is a no-fly zone around Destin Airport and the beach. And is that not correct?
That's all correct. Yes, ma'am.
So one of the problems that we're having here, and I'm getting this information from Mike Stubblefield, who is the tower manager, is that there is no ordinance here. So we do have a UAS sheriff deputy by the name of Sheriff Willis. He has no enforcement power on people breaking these rules.
Well, okay, so he does have a little bit of power. So let me address two issues. One is whether or not it's a no-fly zone. So Mike, I know Mike in the tower, and what he meant to say is it is a zero grid altitude, meaning that you need authorization to fly above that. They're not going to provide that for a recreational pilot because it's in Class Delta airspace, and since you're a manned pilot, you understand that. Number two is that if there is authorization granted, it would be to a Part 107 pilot for commercial use in that area, which would limit that altitude to whatever ATC agreed to, because again, it's a zero grid altitude, both over the beach off of 1-4 or out of 3-2 going northwest. So I'm with you on all of that. The ability, though, for the sheriff to have some authority is he has got the ability, number one, to confront the operator, number two, ask for the required documents, and if that operator doesn't have them, then he can refer them, just like our drone zone cards that I showed up on my website show and are available on our website and in the playbook. If he follows those requests on those cards, it will give us the information that we need, that we can find that operator at $25,000 a throw, so that it will certainly inhibit that person from flying his drone. The other side of it is we do get reports every day about drone operators going above 400 feet. Your example of 1,600 feet is a good one, and it requires your cooperation to complete those reports back to the tower. When you see a drone and you're airborne, then make that report in association with the Airman's Information Manual, and they will report that report back to the Regional Operations Center or the Washington Operations Center, and we'll get it and we'll act on it. We are very eager to make an example out of some people if they're being really crazy, such as the folks that were firing machine guns off the drone or setting fire with a torch or something like that. And certainly violating airspace around a heavily used airport is part of all that. So I applaud you for stepping up. We're certainly trying to help make it better, and I want your Cirrus.
I have a couple other questions. So like in an airplane, we have a transponder, so that can be picked up, and they know exactly who you are in the air. Is there any such thing for the drones that they can identify an aircraft, a drone aircraft?
Well, thank you very much. There's all kinds of technology right now that allows us to either go down the road of ADS-B in a broadcast out kind of situation, or a transponder. We have technology now that's the size of your fingertip on your pinky finger that can be taped onto a drone and the similar location, attitude, altitude, direction of flight, so forth, that we can determine from that. We have a rule that's coming out by the end of this year called the Remote Identification Rule for drones, and it will stipulate the requirements for drone operators to equip their airplanes with something. I'm not free right now to tell you what that something is. We're still working on it. We got to vet it through Congress. We got to do all that kind of stuff. And but it will be out by the end of the year, and it will answer a lot of those questions so that we can identify the pilots, and it will not only be a good source of identification, but it will be a strong deterrent for the bad guys.
So Mike at the tower, he is approving certain drone applications. So I'm aware that there are certain people that are allowed to fly them. He said he turns down the majority. There's only a few. But is it not true that still at the approach and departure ends, there's no flight of drones?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
You bet. Thanks for your question.
Go ahead. Come on up. Press the mic, Captain Howell. There you go. Now state it.
I'm Captain Howell with the Sheriff's Office. I'm Deputy Willis's commander, and I want to correct one thing he said. He said the deputy does have authority. The deputy does have authority to go ask for the documentation, but the deputy has no enforcement authority whatsoever. If he refuses to lower the drone, we have no authority. All of that is under FAA regulations. So I want to correct that part of it. Okay?
Well, I will politely disagree with you, sir. And the reason that I'll disagree with you is that in a matter of public safety, if you think that that drone operator is endangering your public, you have every right to conduct an enforcement. What you won't do is handle the public, the civil penalty. That's my responsibility. But it's up to you as a law enforcement agency and your community to make that decision. That's not mine.
Yeah, I understand that, but under what statute? We have CFR 14 has not been adopted by Florida state statutes. It gives us no authority to enforce CFR 14. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so 14 CFR.
Any of the CFR regulations that are not adopted by Florida state statute, we cannot enforce.
You don't have to. That's the civil penalty that I am responsible for. What you're responsible for is the public law. Public law 115-254 enables you to have that discussion with a recreational pilot or with an unmanned aircraft pilot to determine the safety of flight in the national airspace against the public. That's what I'm trying to help you understand here. And
Okay.
I'm glad to take it offline and have more of a discussion with you if you like.
let's not hijack the meeting, and I'll contact you later this week.
I appreciate that,
That'd be
gentlemen.
great.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to it.
All right. Well, I think, looking around, that is the last question or comments. Do we have anybody there? Nobody's queued up online. So, Mr. Wilson, I want to thank you so much for such an in-depth briefing and to satisfy the questions that some of our council members and the public had. Thank you very much for your time.
You bet, and I'm happy to have any further discussion with the captain or anyone else. It's great to be able to engage at the level that you commissioners council members are responsible for, and that's what we are trying to do. Me and my team, the Connect You outreach team, that's our role, and we're glad to help. So have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. All right. Up next is we will move right into item number 3, our public comments on agenda items that are not public hearings and any other matter that's not on the agenda. What we'll do is we'll start with any folks that are in attendance tonight that like to come up and make public comment, and then I will look to our online folks that might be queued up, and after that I'll check with you, Ray, for any emails or text messages that have come in. Ms. Bell, come on up. You're okay, because nobody's near you.
Okay, Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. So there was something that was mentioned about the drones in the beginning of that presentation about people trespassing on private property to fly the drones. That is a problem. I've watched that over and over again out on Holiday Isle. So I just wanted to acknowledge that that is in fact a real problem. And if you call the people out on it, they go run to their cars and they're gone. Like, hey, what are you doing here? So I just wanted to acknowledge that I personally have been witness to that. The second thing I wanted to say, I see under city manager comments, item 4C is in reference to Noriega Point embayments. My comment isn't so much to the embayments as much as on Saturday evening, I'm not a passenger in a car very often. I usually drive a car. But on that evening, there had been an accident on the island, so I turned around as a passenger in a car and we came back into Destin. And I was sitting up high enough that I could see over to Noriega Point Park. And it was interesting to me that we've been waiting for the third portion of the park to be done with the bathrooms and the walkway, the path, the decking. Help me out, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, my point being is that along that north side of Noriega Point Park, there's no beach left to even place the dock to walk around or the walkway. It's just not there. I don't know. It's like, it's almost like, it appears to be about this wide, and then you have the water, and then you have the dune that starts up. And I can see that there's a portion of it washing away behind that stabilization wall. So I don't know if you guys have seen that. I don't know if you can see it when you're down in the water. I don't look at it that way. I'm not down in the water. But yeah, send a drone. That's a good point. But my point being is that's my concern with us coming up with a third phase is where is that walkway going to go when there's no sand there? I also noticed that the embayments appear to be getting larger inside, and we all know from previous hurricanes that once that wave action starts, is that what's causing those embayments to open up and become wider as they are now behind the rock piles? And if we have a large storm, are we going to be in a position where we were before we ever built up the park? That's just it. Just something I had observed. Thank you.
Yeah, whenever you have sand and waves and hurricanes, sand loses every time. So I think the protection part is to make it give us the most amount of protection under the worst scenario, but it's not definite permanent protection. If it got all swept away, I would assume we'll be having a dredge come in there and pump it all back in, just like we did after Hurricane Opal.
Well, do we even have an update on when the third phase is supposed to start for that?
I think we had a briefing not a few months ago from them.
The best I can tell you right now is they're planning to do it after Labor Day this year. I can't give you a specific date yet.
Okay.
Well, if anyone is interested and wants to have a look, and maybe you can see, maybe I don't know, maybe I just dreamt it, but that's what it looked like. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
I pulled up the Emerald Grand video camera, and it does look like it's already eroding over there. I mean, that to me is really startling. We just finished the project. We haven't even had a big storm come through. Didn't we stabilize that or put in the support barrier or whatever?
I think the seawall itself won't wash away, but the sand in front of it can. We haven't had any storms, but we've had probably one of the roughest summers in a long time. Yeah, especially during
Wave action wise?
just nonstop out of the southwest, and then it come out of the southeast. I mean, the fishing fleet, you know, we were talking about it the other day. Now that snapper season's over, the last 3 days have been slick calm. I mean, it was rough the whole month of July and most of June. So, and that wave action, even though it's on shore in the Gulf of Mexico, that's part of the issues in the pass itself, on the incoming and outgoing tide. So, and we have the pump is open, and I don't know how much you spent on the harbor, but we have a pretty good current coming from east to west when the pump's operating. There's a pretty good flow, and it's supposed to be. That's the whole purpose of it, is to keep the harbor clean. So there's room for erosion.
What about the embayment side? I thought that the whole point of the T-groins and the underwater rocks and all that was to prevent them from eroding away.
I know some of it's natural and it will occur. They will ebb and flow as the seas go. If I can switch back to the other side real quick, though, I can tell you that DEP is aware of that problem on the harbor side, and they're looking at potential solutions before the boardwalk goes in.
So let's just bring boats in and erode it even further, right? We'll talk about that when we get there. All right, thank you.
All right. Okay. Ms. Brown?
Patty Brown, 86 Shira Street. So I think it was really great having the FAA speak. I think that it is really imperative that we have our tower guy come one night, and with the permission of Officer Willis's boss, maybe have him come and explain exactly what's going on, because right now, according to Mike Stubblefield, the tower manager, this is happening 2 to 3 times a week with not only drones, but also kites. And I can assure you, when you are flying at 1,600 feet and you see one of those things fly past you, you're thankful it didn't hit your prop, or if you're in a jet, get sucked into your turbine. That would be catastrophic at best. So it's a huge problem. I know that the FAA focuses on big airports, the 30 miles around big airports. The smaller airports, they don't get as involved. People don't report things like you would hope they would report things. To be honest with you, I've never told the tower I saw a drone go flying by me. And I'm sure a lot of other pilots, but being part of the airport pilot group, people are concerned, very, very concerned. And so it may not be true, but my understanding from Mike is that there has to be either a county ordinance or a Destin ordinance of some sort to really do enforcement. Now, maybe the officer that was here talking with the FAA will get a little different thing, but we have to figure out exactly what that is. Unfortunately, with this being a tourist area, lots of people bring their drones here to get the beautiful beaches and the harbor. And last time there was a 4th of July, my understanding was Lisa Firth contacted the tower and said, please no helicopter flights over the harbor. And then there were all these drones in the harbor flying around, you know, and even if one of those drones got hit by something from the fireworks and fell into a boat, I mean, there's just so many things that it's just not safe. We have to get it regulated, and hopefully they will put some sort of a transmitting device on these drones so they can identify exactly who owns that, like they do with the airplanes. You know, they know exactly where you are and who owns that aircraft. So I think it's just, and I'm willing to work with you guys and make sure to get Mike here so he can sort of tell you what he's personally experiencing being in the tower.
It sounds like there is some avenue for us to legislate something that will help facilitate no drones crashing into airplanes. I think we'll bring Mike in and the sheriff in, and then kind of give us some guidance on the path that we ought to take from a pilot's perspective and from a sheriff's perspective and from the aircraft tower manager's
Because, you know, you
perspective.
can report it to the FAA, but from the time of report till something's done, that person's probably back home. So.
All right.
I have
Thank you
a
for the
question, Patty, and I don't know if you know the answer or not, probably. My understanding is that we have the tower, but there's no radar. Is that correct?
Yeah, when they built the tower, they didn't build it tall enough, number one. There is, like when Eglin is shut down, which has very rarely happened, but now is becoming a different situation. There is something called Center, and Center is located in Jacksonville. So when we leave out of Destin, they turn us over to Eglin. Then depending which direction we're going, they'll turn us over to Jacksonville Center or Mobile Center. And so they can't make that connection if Eglin's closed. They have to literally call on the telephone over to Jacksonville, but nobody ever answers. So they have no way of like communicating with the center, which is really an important thing. So they need a direct line to Center. The other thing that they're having issues with is being able to pick up planes and be able to keep aircraft separation because they don't have a good enough radar system. They said they can work with 2 lines, they would prefer 4 lines, and it's all for, you know, if these fighters are going over and they're trying to keep aircraft separated, they can't do it right now. So, but it's a very expensive, apparently, upgrade.
Can drones be picked up by radar, or does it depend on what size or what material they're made
You know,
of?
I don't know about the drones, sorry.
It might be a question to ask the Stubblefield. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So, but there are some things that I actually sent a letter to Kelly Wines for the county, since it is a county airport, that there are some upgrades and things that really need to be looked into for safety. But sadly, they didn't build the tower high enough. So if we are coming downwind, they can't see us. So it's bad.
Mayor, I have a comment.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Ms. Patty, it was my understanding that the sheriff's department could go out if they could find the person that's actually flying
Oh, I'm sorry.
the drone, if the sheriff's department could locate the person that's actually flying the drone and ask for the proper documentation, and if they don't have it, they could do a report and turn that into the FAA.
The hardest part is finding out who's flying that drone, because they can fly them pretty far away from where their location is and pretty high. You know, some of the bigger
Correct.
drones.
But that was my question. Yeah, if you call FAA, I mean, just, 3 weeks later, they'll send somebody down or look into it. But if the sheriff's department went out and could actually find out who was flying that drone, and if they didn't have the proper documentation, they could do a report and turn that over to the FAA or the proper authorities, and that person could be fined that way, was my understanding. But hopefully the sheriff's department will get with them and figure that out.
No, I think that's exactly what the FAA guy said, that if you get the person and make sure they have the right documents, then you can do something down the road. But it's a very difficult situation to locate the person flying that, and then to notify them and get enforcement. You know, it's difficult. But we really need, more than anything, keep them out of the approach end, departure end of the freeway and below 400 feet, because we would not be at 400 feet until we're very close to the runway.
Thank you, Patty. Appreciate it. I know you'll keep us going on that one. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
Obviously, we'll hope that Captain Howell will talk to Mr. Wilson and work out that information. Do we need a motion, or can I just ask that this be placed on the agenda for the next council meeting and work on having the tower manager here to give us more information? Do we need a motion, or can we just?
No, I just think we can just get it. We don't need a motion, do we? City manager, you just make sure it gets on the agenda?
We can work to get him on the agenda as soon as possible.
And then if Captain Howell could work that out and get back to us with that as well, in that way to disconnect. One big takeaway from all that, realizing it's a civil penalty, not a criminal penalty, $25,000 is significant, very significant. It's something to keep in mind. Obviously, it's predicated on finding the person that's flying the drone, but that's something to consider.
All right. So, Lance, will you just reach out to the Sheriff's Department and the manager at the tower and see if we can get both of them in here together at the same time?
We'll do that.
All right. There you go. All right. We've got anyone else in the room that would like to make a public comment? We're still in the public comment. Seeing none, do we have anybody queued up?
No, sir.
Nobody's queued up. Ray, do you have any comments, written or text messages? Seeing none at this point, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing portion of the meeting. Just to remind everybody, there'll be an opportunity at the very end of the meeting for the public to weigh in on anything that's going to take place at this meeting, or if it just comes to your mind. So with that, we're going to move on to item 4A with City Manager Report. Lance, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we dive into 4A, I was going to have James announce the members of staff who are with us online in case council has questions for those staff members.
Okay, thank you very much.
In attendance, we have Catherine Card, Karen Jankowski, Lisa Firth, Louis Zanguzzi, Crystal Strickland, Wen Livingston.
Thank you, James. Item 4A is regarding the Leonard Destin Park and transferring the ownership to the city of Destin. A little over 5 years ago, this project took off. We're fortunate tonight, and it was a surprise to me because I thought she'd be here online, but we have Kate Brown from the Trust for Public Lands, who was the project manager for this almost from day one, and I would just ask if she would like to say a few words about this new park.
Good evening. Very happy to be here in person to hand over the ownership of this beautiful new park to the city of Destin. And we did start working on this 5 years ago, just when I first moved to Florida. So it's been my baby project, and I'll miss, this is my second home, so I'll miss this park, but I know a lot of people will enjoy it. And I have the deed right here in my hot little hand to hand over. And I just wanted to tell you all what a pleasure it is to have worked with you, and your staff especially has been amazing to work with, and I think I'm thrilled with how it turned out, and I hope you are too, and I hope the citizens will enjoy it. And all I need to know now is, when do you want me to take the fence down? So congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's been a long 5 years, I know, a lot of hard work on your account. Been riding my bike past that park, just like, I'll take the fence down tomorrow. It's just, it's really exciting, the fact that we're going to have such a tremendous Bayside park, and I want to thank you and the Trust for everything that you've done to help make it possible.
Thanks. Thank you all. All right.
Thank you, Kate. And we do plan on getting that open as soon as possible. We do have some training that we need to get done with our staff so they're familiar with the equipment and the operations and our policies that apply to that specific park. Hopefully we'll soft open within 10 days to 2 weeks, sooner if possible. We will have a ribbon cutting ceremony that we'll announce to all of you, hopefully inside that 2-week period too, when we can officially kick this park open to the public. I foresee this being probably the most popular park in town. We don't have a splash pad in town, and I think it's going to take off quickly. So we may have parking problems.
And with this, we have a motion to make to accept the transfer of the deed. So, Mr. Destin, if you would like to, seeing how this is named after your great-grandfather, go ahead. Or great-great.
Yeah, it is with great pleasure that I can make the motion, especially on behalf of a family member of Captain Leonard Destin. So I'll move to direct the mayor to execute the attached acceptance and assignment agreement between the city and trust for public land, whereby the city will be transferred the land and all improvements located at Captain Leonard Destin Park, and further direct city staff to obtain an owner's title insurance policy for the land in the amount of $5 million.
And I was going to second that. As a second founding
Rebel had her hand on
I'll
the button.
second
Like
You're a founding family member.
I'll
too.
second
You
as
can
another
second it.
founding family member.
Okay, that is most excellent. Mr. Destin, what a great opportunity to make that motion. We have a second by another historical family, Destin family member. So I have a motion and a second. Is any further comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marler?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Menschel?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, so moved. Go ahead,
Mr. Mayor,
sir.
item 4B is regarding the 3 transient boat slips at Captain Royal Melvin Heritage Park and the city's desire to terminate utilities and garbage service for those 3 slips. And Mr. Baumann is here to answer questions about that.
And just to clarify, my understanding is from city staff that we are not actually being provided those services right now, so we will not lose any services at all. This is merely kind of brought up as a follow-up to an item about a month ago where we were directed to take no further action. But when we're looking at the item again, we do believe it would be in the city's best interest to just further clarify that with the Destin fishing fleet that we know we are not accepting any utility or garbage waste / disposal services from there. So.
And we have a recommended motion for this.
I'll make the motion, Mayor. I move to direct the city attorney to send the attached draft letter to council for the Destin Fishing Fleet, Inc.
I have a motion.
Second.
We got a second from Mr. Menschel. Is there any further comments, discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Menschel?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marler?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Press on, sir.
Item 4C is regarding the request. Staff is requesting direction for relating to Noriega Point embayments. On July the 6th, council had asked staff to send a letter to FDEP to determine if they were amenable to allowing non-motorized vessels in the embayments only. That letter was drafted and sent to FDEP. We have since received a response, which I believe you all have a copy of. The response being that they were not agreeable to that, stating that in our application that we agreed to allow boats and swimming in the new embayments, and state in our management plan that we stated we would allow boats and swimming in our new embayments. So that being said, staff is simply looking to council for direction on how to proceed with this. At one point, we were looking at bringing back a resolution about an embayment or multiple embayments. We're just looking for council's direction on this at this point.
Didn't we leave for you to do a resolution to leave one abatement for both per the agreement? Nothing's been done on that. Do you remember that, Mr. Destin?
I mean, we had discussed it, but we had tabled the direction to do the resolution based upon a workshop, which I think over the span of COVID, we kind of delayed it, and then we had other things that intervened, and then we sent the letter to DEP for clarification, and we got it back, and then we had more discussion, and then we sent this most recent letter, at which point, with the little nuanced final question about motorized versus non-motorized, we've gotten our response, and so tonight, I think it is prudent that we decide whether we are going to have staff draft a proposed resolution and what it would look like, or not. So, I mean, that's where that's going to go.
I'll entertain a motion to some effect.
I'll put a motion out on the floor to instruct staff to draft a resolution in line with the intent of closing the embankments south of the most northerly embankment only to pedestrians and swimming uses, and then leaving the northernmost embankment open.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a second. So, further discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm going to just register the same comments I've registered previously, that I don't think we are obligated to open any of them to boaters, and I highly oppose opening any of them to boaters.
Thank you, Dr. Ramswell. Go ahead, Mr. Overdeer.
Okay, so I mean, I think that what the resolution is going to say is basically what was partially agreed to, maybe just by a handshake or a head nod, when we sent everybody over there, the lawyers, and I think Parker went with them, and they kind of agreed that we could just have one abatement open, and I think that's what the resolution is basically going to state, correct?
Yeah, per that motion, correct.
Okay, yeah, that's what they agreed to. But so I think if even though that the letter that we got back from them, this most recent letter kind of said that they didn't agree with that, but they did agree to it. So I think that's what we ought to ask for.
All right. Any further comments? If not, let's go ahead and take a vote on this motion. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Menschel?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
No.
Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Vote is 6-1, so moved. Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4D is asking for council's approval to use the Morgan Sports Center eastern parking lot on several occasions in the upcoming future as a COVID-19 testing spot, drive-through testing spot. We previously had a location on Beach Drive at one of our churches. It's no longer available for that purpose. And we've been up there with staff, and the health department has also been up there in that eastern parking lot, and logistically we think we can make that work. I think it would be an outstanding service to provide our residents to have that back in Destin again every other week or however often they can do it.
All right, I'd like to entertain a motion to this effect.
Mayor?
Go ahead, sir.
Yep. I move to allow a portion of the Morgan Sports Center to be used as COVID-19 testing site, and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement with the State of Florida Health Department.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion and I have a second. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Menschel?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, so moved. Mr. Johnson?
Item 4E is a scheduled update regarding the complaint policy and its current status. Ms. Karen Jankowski is online. She's been working with our city attorney and city staff to adopt the version that we received from the Okaloosa County School Board, and she is available online to update where we're at right now.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you, everyone. I apologize for not being there tonight, but so As the agenda item said, as of late Friday afternoon, we had a Teams meeting, very productive. So we've got a lot of good information to incorporate, and I appreciate the school board's policy for our assistance to improve my draft. So hopefully we will be able to have something for you as soon as possible. To provide transparency, I've added this to the project tracking sheet on the council updates, so that you'll see that weekly. And then also I'll provide updates at the council meetings. Due to the COVID, unfortunately, my job has been very much absorbed by a lot of COVID functions. So I will do my best to update you and get you a draft policy as soon as possible.
Does any council members have any questions or comments? Seeing none, thanks for the update. We don't need to take any action at this time, correct? All right.
No, sir, that's correct.
All right. Anything that you'd like to add?
I just appreciate your support, and I hope to have something soon.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4F is regarding the purchase and sale agreements for 3 beachfront parcels, and I'm going to turn this over to Deputy Warren to introduce this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The Destin Beach Initiative began in 2019 when the Destin City Council provided a vision to expand or create additional public beach parks within the city of Destin. Since its inception, the Destin Beach Initiative has picked up tremendous momentum, which is a testament to this City Council and the Mayor's vision, as well as the power of partnerships. During this process, City of Destin staff has been working hard with the City Attorney, the Land Use Attorney, and through partnerships with Okaloosa County, the Okaloosa County Tourist Development Council, as well as the Trust for Public Land, which I'd like to again recognize Ms. Kate Brown, who is here in attendance and can answer any questions. Staff is very appreciative of our partnerships with these agencies and how incredibly supportive they have been to this project. At this time, it might be best for the city representative to the Okaloosa County Tourist Development Council, our own Councilmember Parker Destin, to continue to speak to this top priority project, and staff will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. If it's possible, could we throw the presentation up on the screen there? Thank you. So I'm going to give you a very brief presentation this evening because, of course, this current council has been very much involved in this process since the beginning, so I won't belabor any worn-out points. Each of us knows exactly how important the reestablishment and reacquisition of beachfront for the benefit of the public, how important that means for the public at large and for generations to come. So, the Public Beach Initiative, basically, we know why we need it. In Destin in particular, unlike many areas around us, the deeds and the history of how that land was transferred on the beachfront is different than some of the surrounding areas, which puts us into legal contention on who exactly owns the beach and exactly where and when private versus public starts and stops. And because of that contention and the lack of dedicated public beaches over the last 35 years at least, has created quite an acute problem where the general public feels that there's nothing left. And you can go down that slide and read it. You don't need me to read it for you, but we know of all the horror scenarios that just continually get told to us in the complaint form of people have no more access to the beach unless they are staying in accommodations on the upland parcel. And that is usually about 90% of the beach-going public. They're simply not staying at those accommodations. So, how do we solve the problem? So, we can continue past this one. This is another look at the issue being discussed in the media. But how do we solve this problem? Well, it starts with partnerships, and it starts with the fact that when you have everybody in lockstep pulling the same rope together, you'd be amazed what you can accomplish. And so we have to give due credit to our partners to to the Okaloosa County Board of County Commissioners, the Okaloosa County TDC, our partners at the Trust for Public Land, and it's without those folks that we simply couldn't do this. So moving ahead, we had established it as a top priority in 2020 in our visioning session, and we have pledged over $9 million in half-cent sales tax funds over the next 10 years to fund this initiative for our share in the acquisition project. Hopefully, the county tomorrow will also pledge a significant portion of acquisition funds. If you go to the next slide, it may be to the tune of around $13 million. And that is with the partnerships with the TDC and the Board of County Commissioners. So we know the acute issue with the problem, the density of rentals in Crystal Beach, and the general public at large wanting to utilize what is ultimately a 1.5-mile stretch from James Lee Park all the way to the edge of Henderson Beach State Park. There's a tremendous amount of burden or desire to simply use beaches, and if you can forgive the size of the slide, but if you look at the very small sliver, that is the shores of Crystal Beach Park, which is 67 feet, and each one of those purple dots is at least a known short-term rental that I believe exceeds 5 rooms, which is, those are the big ones. That doesn't even include the myriad and numerous smaller rentals, including the residents who live there as well. So, moving on to the next one, you can see that's a closer up picture of just the 5 bedrooms or more in Crystal Beach. We know that there is a need for the tourists, but honestly, it is the public that lives here, pays the taxes, and honestly moved here to enjoy the beaches that we need to be looking out for primarily, because if we can help them, we can help the tourism at the end of the day. Let's go to the next one. I'm going to need glasses here real soon, but if you can see the proposal, this is a bit of a redundant point, but ultimately this is 6,600 feet. It's 1.5 miles with thousands of people trying to utilize the same chunk of beachfront, and there is very, very limited public access. So getting into the specifics of this acquisition, we have a current existing beachfront park that is an enhanced access. So it has an existing parking lot that many accesses don't have. There's an existing pavilion and some restrooms, and it's about 67 feet wide. And if you go to the next slide, you're going to see the proposal in green surrounds the blue area, which is what we have already, but the expansion would include 3 separate parcels and would increase the entire length of the park to about 251 linear feet. So we're existing at 67, and the acquisition of the other parcels will basically triple the size of the park. Yes, it will include the uplands as well. So if we go to the next slide, you can see an aerial. These are specific slides to each individual acquisition. There are 3 parcels. This is the westernmost parcel, which is called Crystal Port. If you go to the next one, you will see the one that is contiguous to it to the east, which I believe that one is, I can't remember the exact name. Both of these to the east are actually short-term rentals that mostly mirror each other, but it's lot 2966 and, 68 and 2970. Exactly, expansion 1 and 2. So if we continue on, you'll see the shores at Crystal Beach is literally at the end of Hutchison. It is the entryway to Crystal Beach once you get off the Mid-Bay Bridge, which is the north-south corridor into Destin. And if you want to take anything home from this presentation and anything that you can share with the public with regards to how absolutely pivotal and progressive this position in this project is, it's going to be the transition from what we have to what it's going to be. All of us Many of us in this room grew up here. Many of us have lived here for a very long time, and all of us know that over the last 2 decades, if you drove down old Highway 98 in Crystal Beach, if you looked shoreward, we haven't seen the beach in several decades. This is going to be the first time that you will be able to see the beach in an old Destin fashion in decades. So that's the existing street view. If we go to the next one, this is what we're going to have afterwards. And it probably will make your eyes well up with nostalgia, because many of us remember a time in Crystal Beach where that was the majority and not the exception. Yep. So I can't tell each of you how excited I am to have the ability to bring this forward to the County Commission. I can't tell you how excited I am to be partnered with all of the community partners, everybody from the trust, from the TDC to the county commissioners, and my fellow council members. But I'm also extremely grateful for the hard work of everyone's staffs within those organizations that have worked tirelessly and oftentimes will not ever get the credit that they surely deserve for making sure that this thing happens. And guys, I'm excited to say this is the first bite at the apple. This is going to be first of many acquisitions where we are going to be turning the dial back to a Destin that was far more familiar and far more enjoyable from a quality of life standpoint. And it's because of folks taking unconventional approaches to our problems and saying that inertia is no longer going to keep us from solving our problems. And guys, I think everybody deserves a good pat on their back, because this is happening. And it's because of just willing it to be so. And I'm awfully proud. So Skip, if you could, I know you are the best at reading recommended motions. If you'd tee it off for us, I'd give you the floor.
I can do that since you're included in the motion. I know that's why you probably don't want to make it. Otherwise, I'm sure you would make it. But I move to direct city staff to bring these 3 purchase agreements back to council for approval as soon as legally possible. Direct city staff and the city's attorneys to work with the county staff and county attorney to draft an interlocal agreement between the city and county relating to this matter, and designate TDC representative Councilmember Destin as the council's representative on this matter, and direct him to present the matter to the county commission at its meeting on August 4th, 2020.
Second.
I got a motion. I have a second from Dr. Ramswell. Is there any comments from any of the council members on this issue? Seeing none.
I do.
Go ahead, Ms. Ramswell. I mean, Dr. Ramswell, sorry.
So question, I know there is another lot that is vacant immediately west of Crystal Port, and I was wondering what the status was about looking into that vacant lot.
We've got Kate Brown coming up to answer that question.
Hello again, Kate Brown from Trust for Public Land. Yes, so just to the west of the Crystal Port property is another vacant lot, which was not available when we were trying to put all this assemblage together. I understand it is available now, but we haven't come to any terms of an agreement on that yet. We'll keep it in the works, and hopefully that will be in a future round of acquisitions. But right now, it's not part of the current batch. So we'll keep it on the radar.
Thank you.
But it's on the list.
It's on the list.
On the to-do list.
But yeah, we're gonna, you're dealing with private owners and willing sellers, and it's a pretty big effort to get folks all lined up. Just these 3 is, you know how it is if you ever bought and sold a house, tried to do that on the same day. I mean, it's quite hard to get everybody together. But these folks have been super to deal with, and really, I think they all are just believe in the purpose and the public use of this property going forward. So I think we've been very fortunate to have good sellers to work with, and I'm sure we'll find some more. So stay tuned for that. Any
Terrific.
Other
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, Rodney, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank all the county commissioners, everyone at the TDC, the city staff, and everyone that's worked on this. This is huge for the city of Destin, and it's also, I think, a win-win for the entire county. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone involved.
Yeah, and for me, the exciting part is this is the beginning of this public park acquisitions. There's more willing sellers. Ms. Brown would tell you that. So as we can get the funding and our staff continues to work hard, there's more beach access available. So it's not like the only thing that we're going to get done. The exciting part is we're getting started. So I want to just say the same thing that Rodney, what Rodney said is what I feel. Thank you, Rodney. Appreciate it very much. All right. We've got the motion. We got the second. So, Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdare?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. So moved.
Ms. Brown, I just want to tell you thank you for all of your efforts. We're very happy to have the Trust for Public Lands as a partner in this process, and just let your staff know that we are greatly appreciative for their efforts.
And we're not done with you yet. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Item 4G is regarding the library technology improvements that staff is recommending. Staff is recommending that we undertake an RFID upgrade at our library to the tune of $75,000 to $100,000. Understand that's a large number and it is unbudgeted. However, we have strong reason to believe that this will be reimbursed by the CARES Act. We have staff that is available to do this work, installation, get this thing up and running in a much more timely manner at this point, because we are not operating all of our normal operating hours, and they can devote a lot of that other time to getting this project up and running. We have our head librarian, Miss Wynn Livingston, online to fill in the details. Wynn?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, Mayor, City Council. What I wanted to tell you about this is our RFID technology. I need to explain to you how we currently do books. Right now, if you go to the library and check out a book, the back of the book has a barcode on it. So the library staff has to handle the book and put it under the scanner to scan the book to check it out. Also, we also have to take their library card, touch it, and scan it so that we can get their account up to check books out. What this system does is it puts a tag in each book that emits a radio frequency, so that then we have a self-checkout kiosk. Someone can come in, go to the shelf, get their books. They can go to the kiosk, scan their card, lay the books on the kiosk. It checks the books out for them. They get their receipt and they can leave. They don't have to have anybody handling their books before during the checkout process. And what we're trying to do is make the library a more touchless way so that we can cut down on the COVID. And also then there would be staff pads that would be at the circulation desk, so that rather than touching the books individually, staff place a stack of books on the pad, the system checks them out, and then they can be handed back to the patron without having to individually touch each of the items that way. And most places now, people are going to self-checkout, and I feel like the library should be able to offer that as well for people that want to use it.
Is there, anyone have any questions? Or do you want to entertain a motion on this particular issue? You have a recommended motion?
We have a recommended motion.
Okay, I was looking for it. I didn't see it. Go ahead, Mr. Destin.
No, I'll wait.
I don't have it either. I'll entertain a motion.
I have it, Mayor. Mayor?
Go ahead, sir.
I have the recommended motion. I move for staff to release an RFP for RFID technology to improve the safety of our library staff and patrons while improving the efficiency of library operations, to pursue CARE Act reimbursement for this project, and for the bid committee to provide a recommended ranking and selection of vendors to the city council for approval.
Second.
I got a motion, I have a second. Any questions or comments on this particular issue? You said it was unfunded requests, so we just use non-committed funds to pay for it up front and then submit for reimbursement. Is that how that will work?
Yes, when the recommendation comes back to council, we will ask council for a budget amendment to use unallocated funds.
Okay, because we're still in that process too, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Well, then I have a motion, I have a second. Any further comments? Seeing none from everyone. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved.
Couple announcements. One regarding the COVID-19 measures, just an update. The county's resolution, I believe it was, is now in effect, requiring that local businesses post on their doors what their internal procedures and requirements are for staff and their customers wearing masks. The city likewise has posted those on our facilities. I think we talked about this at the last meeting, but just in case, we are requiring staff to wear masks if they cannot exercise the 6-foot rule, and we're requiring masks by staff if they are meeting with members of the public. As far as our facilities go, our lobbies are still currently closed. We're watching it very closely and hope to be able to implement a reopening plan soon. Our numbers, I believe, are going in the correct direction. Not that we're out of the woods. We still have some cases and we still have some new positives, but we have more negatives than positives. So we're trending in the right direction. And we have Ms. Karen Jankowski online, who somehow is trying to keep this straight in a policy that changes, it seems like every 3 or 4 days, and she has to update the policy. But that's just the world that we're currently living in. So I don't know if Karen wants to provide any additional information.
You have the floor, Karen.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So we're hoping that this business operation guidance, as we're calling it, will eventually be a policy, but it's changing so frequently that we are doing updates as we learn and are able to move forward and make adjustments. So I think we've had at least 4 revisions. I'm working on an additional one with additional information, obviously with the county's ordinance and our posting. So that should be out hopefully this week. Our positives have held at 13, but we're up to 28 negatives. Some folks are just out of caution and care are going to get tested, which we are welcoming folks to do that if they wish to. Of those 13, we do have 10 that have been cleared by a doctor, but we are erring on the side of caution, extremely on the side of caution on this. So we're asking folks to stay home even if they have just the sniffles, and to suggest they get tested. And some of the results are coming back quickly, some of them are not. So we are utilizing the family medical leave and the paid sick leave under federal regulations that runs through December 31st.
This may be a question for the city manager as much as yourself. As you're reevaluating, reopening up our buildings to the public, how are you going to establish those that threshold before you do that? What all do you have in mind for that, to set that policy?
Karen, do you want to jump in or you want me to take this?
I can start, and if I start saying something wrong, please cut me off. Maybe James can cut me off. But again, we're probably erring on the side of caution here. We're going to follow the Department of Health and current environment of the county, and also the environment of staff. So, knock on wood, we're holding right now. So I think we're really looking for sort of a plateau in this before we really make too many changes. And of course, I'm sure Mr. Johnson will be happy to bring this up to council for their authorization and movement forward. So, Mr. Johnson, I don't know if I've said everything appropriately.
No, you did very good. One thing that we're doing is we're getting the senior leadership team as well as the leaders involved in helping to make this decision, because there's a certain level of what we implement that it has to be accepted by our crew, and they have to believe that they're being protected as well as the public being protected. So we're trying to involve them as much as we can, especially when they come back online. They're getting their legs back underneath them. Additionally, we have multiple professional organizations, of course, including the CDC and the local health department, but each one of our individual areas such as recreation or public services and finance, we all have our professional organizations who are offering additional guidelines for how to ease back into this, and we're trying to take in all that information and make that a part of our plan as we move forward. It's changing rapidly, so we can make a decision at one point and 2 days later we may have to reverse. Case in point, some people were saying that we were ready to start schools this week. Others said, whoa, put the brakes on, let's wait until the 1st of next month. So, I mean, those are still changing as we speak right now. So we're trying to make final decisions on when we start up our kids club and activities like that normally we would be going wide open with soccer and kids club right now. Ms. Firth has got the challenging decisions of how to protect those kids and her staff and get those services up and running as soon as it's safe to do that. So we're working through those issues right now.
I asked that question just for really the public's benefit, and you answered it extremely well. Thank you, Lance. Any questions from any council members along those lines?
Yeah, Mayor?
Go ahead, sir.
If the city manager could give everybody an update on the AC update that we approved last time, I think everybody would be interested in that update.
The unit, the purifying unit for the air conditioning system.
Oh, absolutely. I do appreciate council allowing us to move forward with the installation of those units at all of our major facilities. They're not installed yet, but we have contacted our electrical company, D&D. They are on order. Of course, they're in high demand right now. We're on the list, and we will get them installed as soon as they arrive.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell. Go ahead, Lance.
One more item that I didn't get printed on the agenda. I apologize for that, but we have Ms. Crystal Strickland online to help with this item. But we do have currently a third budget workshop scheduled for a week from today. It's an optional workshop. I believe Ms. Strickland was wanting to know if we wanted to keep that on the books, or if we wanted to postpone it, or if we wanted to a week from today. I'm sorry, I don't have the date.
Yeah, August 10th.
Thank you.
The 10th. Any input from council members on doing that? Or Ms. Strickland, does she want it?
I believe Ms. Strickland, and correct me if I'm wrong, Crystal, but Ms. Strickland believes that we do not need the third workshop, but she would encourage any council member, as always, to come in to meet individually with her or her and myself.
Does that please the council?
Yeah, that works.
Go that
for me.
route? Okay, I think that's what we'll do then.
So we have a consensus to cancel that and just go with individual?
Yeah, the consensus is to cancel it, and then individual council members can come in and speak with her on specific issues.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you, sir. We don't have any public hearings tonight, sir?
Not. I have a break tonight.
Good deal. All right. I got here late because I had some boat issues. Mayor Pro Tem, Dr. Ramswell told me that we pulled items C and E from the consent agenda, and we'll discuss that after I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda at this time.
I'll make a motion to accept A, B, D, and F.
I have a motion.
Second.
And I have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Braden.
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Oberdere.
Yes.
Mr. Marlar.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan. Yes. All right. Let's do item C, miscellaneous pest control services authorization to renew the contract. Go ahead, whoever pulled that.
It's me, Mayor.
Go ahead, sir.
Just something I'd like staff to take a look at. If you look at page 9, which is Exhibit A alpha, on the cost, it shows, for example, our library is 15,000 square feet, and we're paying $18 a month for that service. Our maintenance facility is 12,000 square feet, and we're paying $10. The sheriff's office building is only 6,000 square feet, and we're paying $18 for that. I don't know why we're paying 18 for 6,000 when we pay 18 for 15,000. I'd like them to just take a look at that, please.
We'll be happy to look into that.
Okay. That's all I had for that one, Mayor.
Do you have any recommended discussion you want them to look into it before any action's taken, Mr. Mitchell?
I just want to call their attention to that. Looking at that, at the pricing on there, it just seemed like the $18 for the sheriff's office for 6,000 square feet was a little high when we paid $18 for 15,000 square feet, and we only paid $10 for 12. So obviously, we should probably be paying a little bit less than 18 for the sheriff's office.
That would make sense, yes. So look into it, Lance. Okay, get back with us.
We'll do that.
All right. Any further comments on item C? Seeing none, let's move into item E, miscellaneous generator maintenance.
Real quick, Mayor,
Go ahead.
Are we going to approve this agreement, or are we going to bring it back after staff has looked into that?
I think probably, Steve, if you want to put a motion to continue that item to a date certain, perhaps the next meeting, and then they can come back. That might be the best way to do it, so we can get it off this agenda, but set it for the following.
That'll work.
Go ahead.
I make the motion to have staff bring this back at the next council meeting for vote after they clarify this information.
Second. Okay, I got a motion and a second. Any further comment? Seeing none, Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell? Okay, yeah, that was a yes. I read his lips.
Yes.
Public record. Mr. Overdere?
Yes.
Ms. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan? Yep. Okay, so moved. Item E, miscellaneous generator maintenance services, authorization to renew the contract.
That's me again.
Ed, sir.
Is Mr. Burgess available? Is he? I don't know if he's in the room or
Yes,
online.
he is. Yes, he's here.
Okay, my question to Mr. Burgess is, have we repaired the generator at the sheriff's office?
No, sir, we have not.
Okay, well, I'm beyond words on this. As much as we talked about this contract over and over and over, lo and behold, on here, we're paying $475 for the sheriff's office generator. After all the hoopla we did last year on that, I thought this would have been corrected, but obviously it wasn't. So my first question is for staff is, did we actually pay that $475 last year in this contract? And if we do, we need to get a refund. And number two, we need to resolve this contract because, again, it's not correct.
Councilor Mitchell, when we awarded the generator maintenance continuing services contract to Metro Power, along with the signed copies of the contract, they received a letter. And if you would bear with me for a moment, it says, it's addressed to Metro Power. Please be advised that the generator at the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Substation at 107 Stallman Avenue is not functional, and there are no plans to replace the unit at this time. Do not attempt to perform any maintenance on this unit. So that's just a clarification. Some of our contracts have stipulations for possible future services, and that remedies the situation for having to come back to council with amendments.
Well, that letter's not included in here, and we're trying to approve a contract that clearly shows they're performing this maintenance at this location. Okay, so my first question is, did we pay the $475 this year that's on this contract?
No, sir.
Okay. I think we need to clean up the contract because we shouldn't be approving something that clearly shows $475 being billed to us when we don't have a generator. So I'll make a motion to delay this contract to resolve this error and bring it back at the next council meeting for vote.
I have a motion.
Second.
And I have a second. Is there any further discussion on this matter?
Yeah, I got a question, Mayor.
Go ahead, sir.
This is for staff. What is the problem? What's the holdup or the issue with the contracts? Why can we not get these things cleaned up, and why are we being sent a contract like this to approve? That's not right. Where are we getting lost at?
I guess that's for you, Lance.
The only thing I can say is there has been a generator at that location. At some point in time, the city could elect to either replace or repair that generator, and at that time, we would need to have the maintenance in place to maintain that generator.
But we're approving, you're asking us tonight to approve a contract with that generator, them servicing that generator. Why would you approve an agenda item to be placed on the agenda for us to approve that's not correct?
Well, I'm going to just say that it's like approving a value up to, but not to exceed. And if the invoice doesn't reflect that amount, then the city is not out that amount of money. I understand your point, and we can clear that off if it makes people feel more comfortable. I understand what Mr. Burgess was trying to do by including it that way. If we did repair or replace that unit, we had a maintenance policy in place. But I understand your point, Mr. Braden. We can clean that up.
So basically what you're saying is the generator's not operational. There's a addendum to the contract that says it's not operational and there's no plans to fix it at this time. Thus, there will be no maintenance performed on it, and that was in the addendum, a direction to them not to work on it, right?
That's right, and we should have included that document in the packet.
Yeah, that's the only lapse there, because if we saw that, then there wouldn't have been the question. Go ahead, Mr. Menschel, I know you have a comment.
There's no addendum to the contract. It's simply a letter to the people. So to say it's an addendum to the contract is not correct.
Okay, I stand corrected. I used the wrong word.
The point here is the fact that I made a very big issue out of these contracts last year, and specifically probably 4 or 5 times specifically spoke to the sheriff's office generator. Okay, and I understand about future things. Well, guess what? In the future, if we were going to repair the generator, we could add it to the contract. But something that we're not utilizing and we're not paying for needs to be omitted in this contract or any other contract that we have. That's not the way to do business. That's all.
Thank you, sir. You get the message?
Yes, sir.
There we go. Any further comments from anybody else? All right. Now we have a motion, right? We have a motion and a second. We'll take it to a vote. Do we need to restate the motion? No. Everybody's no. Okay. I just make sure everybody knows. Ms. Morgan.
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes.
So moved. Votes unanimous. All right. That's now moving on to item number 7. Councilmember Braden, how you feeling, first of all? It's good to see you.
Believe I'm back to 100%, Mayor. I appreciate it. That was a tough run. But I have nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Dr. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I have on here 2013 Dredge report. This was an item that I placed on here because there is no after report that is showing how much sand was dredged and how much was placed on Noriega Point and how much was placed on the private property. In accordance with the terms of the agreement that was in place at the time, the private parcel owner was supposed to retain 20% of the sand that was placed there as spoils, but there is no record of the cubic feet, I'm having a moment, that was actually placed and what was kept, what was removed. And I find that really unusual, and I had Ray try to look. He couldn't find anything either. The last thing that was talked about was that they had already gotten a specific number of cubic yards. They felt that there was another 5,000, so they asked for $10,000 more from the council on August 30th. Council approved the additional funds to get the other 5,000 cubic yards out. But again, nothing after that indicates at all anywhere how much was dredged, how much was placed. So I'd like staff to dig into that further. Maybe it's contacting the folks that did the dredge. I don't know, but there has to be a record somewhere that indicates how much was pulled and placed.
When you were on the council when that dredging was done, you weren't? I thought you were. You weren't?
No, in fact, when I came on council,
14?
I think in 14, I think that very first night that I was inaugurated, Rodney and I, we made the vote to extend the license agreement because they were awaiting on a joint license for another dredge project. And they were trying to wait until they got that license because then they could remove all the spoils, the other 80% of the spoils off that private parcel and put them elsewhere. And so that first night on council, we approved that extension of allowing that spoils to be kept there, but there's just no information.
There's no follow-up or documentation
Correct.
that you can find. I remember when they dredged it because the point was almost closed off. You could barely get 2 boats through there when they did that. It was really bad. So,
does that need to be an official motion, or what do we need to do? Because that's important, especially with different things going on right now in the Noriega Point project and everything.
Yeah, I think a motion would be good for this one.
Let's go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay,
Dr.
then I
Ramsey.
direct staff to look into that 2013 dredge and determine the exact amount, cubic yards of sand that was dredged, how much was placed and where, and how much that private parcel owner kept. And
Second.
thanks. And if we could have that report back 30 days, I would think that should be long enough to dig through records or make a call to the dredge company.
Yeah, you would think that'd be part of their permitting is to make those
Yeah.
reports, so I'm sure,
Yeah, especially the
there's
after
got to be some
report.
documentation for that. All right, so I have a motion and I have a second. Any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Ms. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Votes unanimous, so moved.
Thank you, and that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Ramswell. Next up, Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, sir, a couple of things. Just to clarify some stuff that was said at the last meeting. The last meeting, we were talking about a review by the Florida Board of Professional Engineers. Several comments were made that after they concluded their investigation, they would more than likely provide any findings to the state attorney if required. I didn't think that was correct, but I didn't speak out at the time. Tuesday morning after the meeting, I contacted Ms. Anderson, Ms. Wendy Anderson. She's the lead investigator for the FBOPE, and she said definitively that they will not forward any results to the state attorney. Just wanted everybody to be aware of that. That information we had last time wasn't correct. Couple of things, as always. James Lee Park talked about that weekly or every council meeting. Now, my hope is that maybe the press will pick up on this and just help us with that. I'm not going to beat it in the ground any more than normal. It's not our responsibility, but they now have cars that are literally tearing up the grass that's there. Anyway, so we all know about that. City Manager, do you have any update as far as the status with the ASG inquiry?
Sorry for that. August 25th, I'm being told, is the estimated date when we can expect the report back.
Okay, great, thank you. Other question, I know this is not high on the priority list, just asking again. We had talked about in the last council meeting, we obviously had the way sign presentation, which was great. And I know that's a work in progress, but we had talked about the suggestion of putting the blue welcome signs possibly after Mid-Bay Bridge, and didn't know, City Manager, if we got any status on that.
I don't have a status update on the Danny Warfel Way yet. That is the purview of the Mid-Bay Bridge Authority. We've worked with them in the past to try to get signs there. I know that they actually have a plan drawn up, and I think they were actually trying to put it on the Matty Kelly property, which would be the west side of the Danny Warfel Way, because I think there was a problem in the median to put the signage in the median. But we can look into that and get back to you. We'll bring a report back.
Mr. Mitchell, are you talking about the gateway presentation that
Correct.
I had the guys?
Yeah, correct.
I remember an email, I received an email, and I think Lance had mentioned that there was a contact at the city, so I had forwarded their email to that contact, but I haven't heard anything since.
I don't have that information with me right now. I'm happy to bring it back. I just want to give you good information.
Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Destin might want to weigh in because the TDC has a wayfinding project that's been in the works for quite some time. You had any updates on that?
Well, I don't have really definitive information on that project in particular. It's just that all of the TDC projects are being scrutinized under a microscope right now because the TDC funding is based off of bed taxes, and as we know, as this COVID crisis continues to unfold, there are going to be significant impacts on this year's project prioritized in this year's collection, and because of the diminished collections of bed taxes. So I can't say for certain exactly where it sits and where it will be as we move forward. The TDC is in the process of reprioritizing most of the projects, and I can't say for certain exactly where it's going to go. But
and the reason I wanted Parker to give that update, Steve, is because of those issues there. You know, I was of the mind that we just wait and let the TDC do their wayfinding project, but it looks like it could be on the back burner for quite some time depending on our economy. So your idea might be something that for short term that could, would be a good project for the city to take upon itself if we can work with the county and make that happen.
Exactly, that was my intention. Number one, we could produce the signs locally just like we do the Adopt a Street signs. So it would be relatively inexpensive and it could be done pretty rapidly. Obviously, it wouldn't be a permanent situation. It would be low cost, but at least it would allow us to have welcome to Destin. Thanks for visiting Destin. It shouldn't be that hard. City manager said he's going to look into it. Hopefully next council meeting he can give us some update, but I just think it's better than nothing right now because we go into that thing all the time about people not understanding they've arrived in Destin.
Let Lance go, then you. Go ahead, Lance.
And just in addition, I think Mr. Zanguzzi is still online. He is also working on a family of signs which will include signs like what we're talking about right now for our entryways.
Great, thank you. Very good.
And Steve, this is Parker. I'm on the Mid-Bay Bridge Authority. It may, and this is just probably not necessary for a motion, but it might be helpful to have Lance reach out to Van Fuller, who is the executive director of the Mid-Bay Bridge Authority, and have them discuss and at least in an ad hoc way bring back kind of what the Mid-Bay Bridge Authority has been discussing and thinking about from a signage standpoint with a welcome and goodbye sort of messaging on Danny Warfel and at the toll booths. That way we might be able to foster a clear dialogue so that everybody gets whatever the Mid-Bay Bridge Authority decides to put out there, can perhaps have some of the desires of the city of Destin included in the final decision.
That, Parker, to your point, Van Fuller came and gave a presentation probably 2 years ago to Public Works, Public Safety, where they had all of that already in the design phase. And unfortunately, with the emergency on the bridge, because of all the construction and repairs that had to be done, I know that was set aside. So yeah, they may have something, but again, back to money and back to lack of revenue. So all I'm saying is on a short-term basis, if we can move forward locally producing that sign, it would probably go a long way with everything else that you've already included.
Yeah, and can we just do that on a head nod? I don't think we need a formal motion, Steve. I think it's an excellent idea. And Lance, if you'll just, you and Lewis work together on that and bring us back at our next meeting so we can go ahead and make a decision on what kind of pocket change we want to spend, and if we can work with our county and the Bridge Authority partners and get some, signage up, at least have some general ideas anyways.
Yeah.
And last but not least, Mayor, as far as money, the Adopt a Street signs are very, if you would, attractive. They're unusual, they're blue, they've got a city seal, and they're relatively inexpensive. So we don't have to get real ornate about this or spend a lot of money.
Go ahead, Lance.
I can work with Mr. Zanguzzi and Michael Burgess. We'll need some of Michael's assistance because the entryways on the east, the entryways on the west are technically Florida DOT property, and we're going to have to get a permit from them to install a sign in the median out there.
Well, let's go ahead and get our signs, our sign idea in concrete, and then we can approach a DOT. Dr. Ranswell?
Mr. Johnson, you reminded me of something when you were talking about working with others. The Destin, welcome to the world's luckiest fishing village sign. We had the landscaping project and we were awaiting the Air Force to give us the go-ahead. Did you ever hear back from them? That's been probably a year.
So and that's the billboard, right, that we're talking about?
Yeah, and the landscaping underneath and around.
Okay. Ms. Firth, are you still available online? Oh.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. So the commander had put that, it was on his desk, and he put that aside and said that was going to be not looked at right now. And I haven't contacted them for, since back in June, but the lady I was working with, she just said he's not interested in any of it right now.
Right now for the last year? That's
Yes.
a shame.
Well, I think it all has to do with what he's thinking about that beach. That all came down because it was on his desk ready to be signed probably in May, I believe. I don't have all the dates in front of me right now, but when he said he was not going to sign it and look at it right now, that was the same time that he shut the beach down.
Okay, thank you. I know someone that I may ask to look into that.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mitchell, I didn't mean to
Ms.
disturb your thing.
Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
Not a problem. It's all team. The one clarification I would like to make, I'm not advocating to put this in the median itself. I think would be better served putting it off to the right as you come in north or south on the right side of the roadway. I think we'd probably have a little bit easier chance of getting it approved rather than put it in the median itself.
Yeah, try to get DOT out of the
Well, they may still get in a loop, but I just don't think the median. I think if we would just put it on the side, like a speed limit sign or something like that along the left and right side, would probably be better off.
Okay, I see a lot of head nodding, so we'll get on it.
Yes, sir. One other thing, we didn't have an update on our Intergov today, and I have a question for Mr. Warren. We had talked about the possible need of additional manpower, and I didn't know if you've been able to further that. Is there anything we need to do to support that for you?
Yes, we have been putting that into the project tracking list, and the last update, I believe, I read that they had been able to start utilizing that manpower, and it's going well. So as of right now, it is going to be a huge benefit and help us keep that on track.
I guess I'm sorry, I wasn't more specific. When I asked you a meeting or two ago about the scanners themselves, we may put more money on that. I just didn't know if you needed any other support from us on that.
We have been looking into that, and we're trying to find out what might be done in order to help expedite that. We can bring back that update with the next regularly scheduled Compass or Intergov update at the end of this month.
Very good. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Overdeer.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Ms. Marler.
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Destin.
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Destin, I actually have a question for you.
Go ahead.
I'm hearing people say that they were really worried at the beginning of the summer in terms of tourists and people staying in hotels. I'm wondering if you have heard anything, because now people are saying they're actually booking far better and more folks than typical. Have you heard anything in that regard at your TDC meetings?
I have not heard anything other than anecdotals that are in line with what you have said. But give me an opportunity to talk to some of the stakeholders in lodging, and then maybe I can bring you back something that's a little more concrete than what sort of we've heard as rumors.
That'd be great. I know they used to do out the monthly report and itemize it out, but they don't do that anymore, so I can't even go in there and figure it out myself.
And the TDC chairman, we know him, we're pretty familiar. Ken Wampler has access to a significant amount of data, and I might figure out a way to, maybe we can invite him to come and tell us a little bit about what he thinks is happening.
Cool. That'd be great. Thanks.
Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, I've noticed for a while that our workshops start at 5:30 and our meetings start at 6, and our meetings tend to run a lot longer than our workshops. And so barring any real objections, I would move that we change the time of our city council meetings to 5:30 so we can get out of here 30 minutes early every night.
I second that. Oh, I can't do that. I have a motion to move our meetings to 5:30. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a second for discussion, because I'm sure folks would like to weigh in.
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
It was my understanding from way back when, the purpose of this being set at 6 o'clock was allow our citizens the opportunity to come take part. I think that's still a valid concern, regardless whether they're coming in person or via the internet or our remote meetings. We want to allow our citizens to have the opportunity. I don't think that premise of allowing them to take part and having the time to get home has changed. So I personally am against this. 30 more minutes, a little bit longer, we're used to it by now, okay? It allows all the council members to get there on time as well.
You beat me to the punch. Anyone else?
Let me I want to just clarify that. We have council members that work for a living. I appreciate that. They have to get off work and get whatever and get to the meeting as well. So I think it's an advantage as well.
But is there a logical explanation as to why our workshops start at 5:30 and our meetings start at 6? I mean, do we not care about public participation in the public workshops? Is my job not important during the public workshops? Because, I think the people working up here, these meetings go on entirely too long, and they have for the past 4 years. But I would say the past 4 years, public participation has been dismal, and I don't think it's because our meetings start, too early.
Is that a motion to start workshops at 6?
It would be a motion to keep workshops at 5:30 and move our meetings to 5:30. So I just think we'll probably take part in better government at 9 o'clock instead of 9:30 and 9:30 instead of 10, because these meetings can drag on way too long.
Well, we have a motion and we have a second. Does anyone else want to weigh in? Go ahead, Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a tough one for me, because it'd be nice to start at 5 o'clock, and because you have some of the meetings that run till 9, 10 o'clock at night, or people are getting tired, and Just don't put as much time and effort in something at 10 o'clock at night. But then again, you know, like Mr. Mitchell said, I work for a living, and I was actually in the shower at about 5:45 tonight before the meeting, because I had to work late. So, I don't know, it's that way a lot of times. I don't get home till 5 or a little after 5. So, with that said, I mean, I'd love to be able to start the meetings earlier, but I don't know that I can.
I would also say that the first 30 minutes of our meeting are generally, you know, proclamations and approval of the minutes and presentations like this drone presentation that really isn't what the public's coming here for. They're coming here to discuss our city manager report items and our public hearings, which generally take place at, unfortunately, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, which I would argue discourages more public participation than if that took place at 8:30. You know, I think the public's liable to stay here, you know, not as late as into the night as our meetings go, and anything to start them earlier, I think, would actually probably spurn public participation.
Good points on both sides, so now it's time for a vote. We have a motion,
Mayor,
we have a second.
I'll offer just one thing before we vote.
Go ahead, Mr. Destin.
And it's with, you know, Chatham, you're one of my greatest colleagues and friends, but I'm going to have to break with you on this one. I have to share Mr. Overdeer's, excuse me, not Mr. Overdeer, Mr. Minchel's sentiment, which is the purpose of the 6 p.m. start time was to give the general public an opportunity, an hour on a 9 to 5 schedule, to be able to participate. So, and I lament, as you do, the length of these meetings. I don't believe it's the start time. I believe it's the length at which any of us spend trying to talk, and that's just how we need to be reminded, and we do it about once a year. We have to remind ourselves to try to regulate what we say to only the necessary things. We distill what we need down to our points, and if somebody's already said it, then let them have the floor, and then we just move on from an issue, and we just have to try not to beat too many dead horses. So that's individual regulation of ourselves as individual council members up here. So I'm gonna stick with the current time.
All right.
You know, it seems like this when we have this discussion every couple of years, I always am reminded of, I had tried to bring an item forward that said we wouldn't start any new agenda items after 9 o'clock, because that might be a way to get us out of here when we're tired and not really fully alert, and then just put it on the next agenda for discussion. That might be something that might this time around make sense.
Well, I think just efficiency in our actions will help facilitate. We've gone through a whole bunch of stuff here tonight in a very timely manner. It's 8:38. I think it's been a very good meeting. So in that line of thought, we have a motion, we have a second. So I'm going to go ahead and take this to a vote so we can press on. We still have a couple folks that still have to weigh in. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
No.
Mr. Marler?
No.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
No.
Dr. Ramswell?
No.
And Mr. Braden?
No.
Motion fails. Is that all, Mr. Morgan?
That would be it. Thank you.
That was it. Okay. Me, nothing. Land use attorney?
Nothing, thank you.
Good. City attorney?
We have a memorandum responsive to the
Yes, I know we do.
issues related to section 3.09 of the city charter. So we're here to answer any questions or take any further action as directed by council on that.
All right. Thank you very much. It was all in our briefing documents. Any comments?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. When you're discussing things that are coming from the Commission of Ethics and pulling different statutes that relate to the statute concerning the Commission on Ethics and ethics violations, I'm wondering why there's nothing in there regarding the state attorney. And might it behoove us to put something in there about, you know, if there's a rendering of culpability or guilt from a state attorney?
So the reason why it's just the ethics is the charter describes removal based on violations of the standards of conduct or violation of the code of ethics, and both those are found in Chapter 112 Florida statutes. So that's why it's specifically relating to the Commission on Ethics, which is the quote-unquote guardian and arbiter of Chapter 112 Florida statutes.
So I guess my question is, the state attorney would render a more legal decision, whereas the Ethics Commission is just rendering an ethical decision. So wouldn't it be more severe and more likely to be put into something of this nature, a rendering of a legal opinion and culpability?
Yeah, I mean, that is something that we could look into addressing. The issue is that Section 309 of the Charter doesn't describe that type of removal. That doesn't create a vacancy in office. There are ways that, under Florida law, if a elected official commits a felony and certain misdemeanors, then the governor, for instance, has power to remove the elected official. But the charter, our charter, does not specifically describe that as a removal of, or a vacancy in office when a elected official creates that. So it seems we'd probably have to rely on the governor. We could look into whether some sort of ordinance could be drafted to that effect, which is possible. Just because it's not described in the charter doesn't mean that the council doesn't potentially have that power separately and through the ordinance process.
I mean, if I'm charged with something or somebody alleges I've sold drugs or something, and they file a complaint with the state attorney, and well, that's probably a bad example. I don't know, I'm just trying to think of something. If I was charged with something with the state attorney and the state attorney found me guilty, okay, perfect example, the credit card thing that was brought up years ago. If they had found me guilty that I had purposely misused this card in a criminal manner, I personally would think that that would be something that I should be taken out of office or some sort of penalty for my position. But you're telling me that there's nothing that would have covered that.
Well, the governor would have probably removed you from office in that circumstance.
Okay, so is that the final thought then, that essentially if there's a state attorney rendering that the governor would cover it, we don't need to do that?
So that's discussed in the memo. The issue is that there are several statutes. There's 3 or 4 statutes which describe how an elected official can be removed from office. Primarily, it's the governor's responsibility to remove an elected official from office in the event, particularly of some sort of criminal charge. There's also a separate way that the general electorate, through the recall process, can remove someone from office, which is it's an onerous process, but it has been done before. So the question is, does this council have the power to also, if the governor takes no action, effectively act itself and remove one of its own elected officials from office? That is the question. That the recommendation would be to seek an opinion from the Attorney General on that particular issue, because it's unclear under the law whether that is preempted under the law. And generally, removal of elected officials by other elected officials is not something in this throughout the country that is looked upon favorably. Usually that's done by somebody further up the chain, like the governor. So there's no law that specifically prohibits it, but it appears, based on all these other laws, that this particular issue may be preempted out of the city council's hands and belong to the governor. But because there is some murkiness there, we could ask for an opinion from the Attorney General on that particular issue.
Okay, and so in your research, have you not seen any other cities that have anything of this nature written into their charter or covenants?
Yeah, so there are a couple other cities that do have similar provisions in their charter. The issue is, if you do a Google search, you'll actually see that there have been some instances where it seems like a Florida city council may have removed or tried to remove another elected official from office. The facts of those, I'm just reading newspaper articles, so it's really hard to tell what's going on, but it appears that those are very fact-specific instances. In one, the elected official had actually agreed to the process, and then he in fact violated his own process, and he was removed through that. Another was something similar to that. But when you get to the actual case law on Westlaw, there's been no appellate authority and no trial court authority that I could find that spoke to that particular issue. It's not something you see too frequently across the state.
Okay, well, I'm not trying to be difficult. I mean, if we're going to do this, I want to make sure we're doing it and covering all the bases so nobody has to go through all this again. And if this isn't even my thing, Mr. Minchell, I'm sorry. I've sort of hoovered your subject here, so I'll shut up now for a while. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Dr. Ramswell, you have every opportunity to speak like everybody else. It's not a problem. First and foremost, this has identified one of our city ordinances that one of our charter issues. Okay, under Article 3 of our charter, we've discussed previously where there's shortfalls in our charter where we need to do something, and this is yet just another example. Our charter specifically states the different infractions that a city council or a mayor can be removed for, but yet it doesn't tell you how to do it. Okay, so it's a paper tiger. Okay, any of us commit this violation, but it doesn't speak to that. So Kyle, you had talked about earlier in this about the fact that we could possibly come up with a new addition to our charter. I think that was your option number 2, okay, to further qualify 309B. Okay, I think something like that is important to further that along, but I also agree that you should go to the AG for both. So I personally feel both of your options are valid. The original motion spoke to that completely about review the City of Destin ordinances, okay, and or any other laws. You've given us some background on that, but I feel both of your conclusions and both of your suggestions would be a path that we should go down. That doesn't mean we're going to do it, but I think this is a first step. You've opened the door here. You've given us ideas and your conclusions based on your legal review. So I feel like we should move forward with your 2 suggestions. I'll wait for a minute to make a motion to see if any other council member wants to opine on this.
Why don't you go ahead and make a motion, Mr. Minchell, and then we can discuss after the motion's made.
Can I, as a question, can I just add, do I have to read all of this, or can I just say the motion would encompass the conclusion item 1 and 2 under his report?
That should be good, right?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. As long as the rest of the council is familiar with those 2 items and know what they're voting on, that'd be fine.
It's page 7 of 7, the last page of our agenda packet.
Any questions by any of the council members on the document that Kyle sent, so you know what you're voting on? I see none. Mr. Mitchell, so your motion, go ahead and restate it and we'll get a second.
I move that the the city attorney move forward with both of his conclusions, item 1 and 2 of our agenda packet 7 of 7 under his conclusion, items 1 and 2.
I have a motion.
I'll second.
And I got a second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm familiar with the law courtesy of a legal education, and I understand political science to a fairly decent degree, and I understand why collegial bodies like ours are not vested with authority to remove fellow collegial participants. The purpose of that is to keep political factions within collegiate bodies from using provisions wantonly and with political motivation to remove opposition to often smaller sects or groups within any collegial body. So there is usually a reason why it was left open-ended, was so that you didn't create an opportunity for infighting within the city council in the event of charter violations. My understanding is that there are 2 options for the removal of anyone from this body, and there's a reason it's not vested with us. It's vested with the governor, or it's vested with the electorate, either through the regularly scheduled elections every 4 years or through recall provisions. I haven't made up my mind on whether or not I'll support both of these provisions, but I'm very, very leery of suggesting that we should go down the charter amendment route. I think we need to ask the AG its opinion. So to that degree, and Steve, I'm not here to step on your toes because you already made a motion, but I'm not going to support the motion for the first one, which is the charter amendment, but I would suggest pursuing the AG's opinion. So I don't know how the other council members feel about that, and I'm going to I'll leave it open for discussion to feel out the rest of the council before I don't want to throw out a substitute motion and just throw this out of whack. So if anybody else has feelings on this, I'll yield the floor.
My initial response on that would be, if we don't want to at least entertain this and review it, we need to modify the charter and remove it. Why have something in the charter that's basically a paper tiger? We have in there specifically what you can be removed for and no way to do it. So if we don't go down this route, then we need to take it out of the charter, because I don't think we should have anything in the charter that we can't enforce.
Well, and we can't take anything out of the charter, only the electorate can. So if we want to remove stuff from the charter,
we can put it on the agenda like everything else we're putting on it.
Yeah, and there's questions of wisdom on that. I just don't know if there is I mean, you put things also, look, we know that there's checks and balances throughout every branch of government in the United States, but ultimately the checks and balances from everything from the way the legislature checks the balance on the executive checks it on the enforcement branch of what is mandated by the legislature, and then the judiciary has its. I mean, look, there's a lot of it has to do with the character and viability of each person who sits in this, and you have a charter that is also offering inspiration for the behavior of any individual who sits in our seat, so that they will stick to the guidelines, purposes, and goals that are set forth in our charter. But I hear your point. I don't think it's wise to just knee-jerk say that we just have to go and remove those provisions that are going to set up the guidelines of how we internally operate. Because at the end of the day, if it's bad enough, well, then the voters will be the final arbiter of whether or not the individual did or did not do by the book what the voters wanted. I mean, we have recall provisions for that, and in the event of crimes, you have a governor who can exercise their discretion to remove any of us from office for any of the things that we could be, misfeasance, malfeasance, crimes, all of the above. So I'll yield the floor to anybody else, but I'm leaning towards no, at least with the motion including pursuing a further charter amendment.
Any further comments?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I believe the state has plenty of provisions to remove elected officials. And, I agree with, the will of the voters. Whoever this council believes isn't doing a good job, well, if they've broken the law, the governor does have the ability to remove them. And lastly, there's nobody on this board that I want to remove, so I'm not going to support this.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell. Go ahead.
Just two things. Number one, like I say, the bottom line on this is it's in our charter. We've said that enough. But I'll go ahead and take a step back on this, and I'll change my motion for now. We'll see where this goes. I'll change the motion only to include Section 1, which is going to the Attorney General. And we will hold off on item 2 at this time. I'll amend my motion.
So now we have an amended motion. Is that okay with the second?
I'll support that.
Okay, the second supports that. Any further comments? We'll go ahead and take a vote. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, so moved. All right, do you have anything else?
Nothing further.
All right, well then, to wind this up, will be the public comment period, and the public is pretty much gone, but I do see a hand being raised. Do we have anybody queued up for public comments? We
No,
do
sir.
not. On the webinar, Ray, do you have some emails or text messages? Go ahead and read them, please.
This comment is from Miss Eileen Stalvey, 100 Gulf Shore Drive. Is there an update on Noriega Point parking? I viewed a car park from my condo and see many users of the car park not registering their cars. Are you enforcing the fine?
That's, I guess, a question that we can answer, I guess, right, Joey? Maybe?
What is actually the question? They're wanting to know if we're enforcing the parking? We are enforcing the paid parking in Noriega, yes.
Okay, so the answer was that yes, that we are enforcing paid parking provisions on Noriega Point. Correct, Joey?
That is correct.
Just for the public record.
Yes, sir.
All right, any other further comments, Ray? That was it? Okay, no further comments. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.